Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto can sense chakra Chunin exams. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by darknessfeathers, link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Naruto had always known that bars were the best place to gather information, a bunch of drunken shinobi, letting their guards down since they were safe at home and surrounded by their fellow comrades. They would even let go of some highly classified information if the ones high enough in the rankings got drunk enough. Which happened more often than it should. They did, after all, live through the Kickby attack and saw their friends and family slaughtered and their village easily destroyed right in front of them. Not to mention the particularly nasty missions most of them had to take after the disaster in order to bring the village back to its former glory. So it made sense that they would have a lot to drink away. And speaking of the Kickby, so he was the new Jinchuriki for the Kickby. He figured it must have been something like that considering the way the villagers treated him. Naruto had read about Jinchuriki in a book from the library, so he knew what it entailed. But why didn't feel any of the Kickby's chakra? He didn't even feel particularly malicious towards Konoha. Well, more than he should, considering his situation, which he was sure would be 10 times worse if the Kickby was influencing him in any way. Naruto figured whatever seal the Yondaime put on him must have been strong enough to completely block the Kickby. Which would make sense, considering the Yondaime was surely his father. Naruto would have to be a dimwit not to at least think so. He was almost an exact replica of the Yondaime, and there was nobody else in the entire village that looked like they did. What Naruto couldn't figure out was why nobody knew that he was the child of the Yondaime. Everyone knew he was in Uzumaki, so they had to have known his mother, who he knew was Kushina, being the only Uzumaki in the village when Naruto was born, since she was the previous Jinchuriki of the Kickby. His parents were surely married, were they not? And why would nobody know he was the child of a Hokage if his parents were married? The Yondaime was famous, so the villagers and other shinobi would have known about the two of them, even if they weren't yet married, wouldn't they? It just made no sense. Were the villagers that dense that they couldn't even see the resemblance or believe that he was the child of the Yondaime and his wife? Maybe it was because they couldn't accept that their Hokage married a Jinchuriki. Perhaps they thought she had become pregnant with someone else's child. Or did they think that he was just some random Uzumaki child that was born near the village when everyone knew that the Uzumaki clan had been eliminated? Whenever he thought about it, his head hurt. So he just stopped trying to figure it out. His parents were dead, so why bother? He knew who he was, at least. From reading what very little was written about his mother and the Uzumaki clan in the books in the library, he knew that all of the Jinchuriki of the Kickby had been Uzumakis, so it was an obvious choice to make him the next one. He was the only other Uzumaki in the village, so he wasn't bitter or angry about it. In fact, it kind of made him feel closer to his clan, knowing that he was part of its legacy, in a way. He had been on his own since the time he could walk and talk, which made him grow up quick. Taking care of himself, as well as being a Jinchuriki, also forced him to be smarter and more analytical about everything around him. He supposed that he should despise Konoha, but it was the only place he knew, and at least he had the Hokage looking out for him. But he could understand why the villagers treated him the way they did. The villagers hated him because they feared him. And people hate what they fear. But that kind of reasoning was for the weak. Naruto was determined not to let the weakness of the villagers affect him, so he made sure to avoid them as much as he could. Sticking to the shadows, Naruto left the bar. Nobody seemed to notice, which just made him almost shake his head in shame. He was only 7, for Kami's sake, and he was able to infiltrate a bar full of Chunin and Chunin. It was pathetic. Only 7 years after the Kickby attack, and they were back to being so overly confident that they weren't paying attention to their surroundings when at home. Of course, he had been training mercilessly in order to sneak around high-ranking shinobi, but still. They should always be on guard for any sort of attacker invading Nin. Naruto silently made his way through the streets of Konoha, using the shadows and making sure to avoid the hot spots for Anbu sentries, towards the Forest of Death. It had become his second home, after realizing that nobody went in there. Well, except for that strange dark-haired chick that he heard someone call Anko, but she always seemed too lost in her thoughts to notice him. Still, Naruto made sure to stay clear of the area she frequented. He also made sure to stay near the edge, where less of the forest's unfriendly inhabitants were. Naruto sat down in his makeshift home, under a giant tree that had roots that came so far out of the ground that they created a small cave underneath. Naruto pushed some chakra through his system and looked at the seal on his stomach, finally realizing what it was for. He could tell the seal was a product of a very high level of Kenjutsu, but it wasn't one that he had seen before in any of the books he had read. Naruto was just glad that the Hokage had personally taught him how to read, write, and access his chakra when he was 5, so that he could start reading and learning on his own. He had already read everything in the civilian and academy student section of the library and had started reading books from the Genin, Chunin, and Chunin sections of the library. The villagers, for the most part, would just ignore or glare at him, but if he showed even the slightest bit of intelligence, they would turn nasty. He had learned to just hide his intellect and his interest in learning from everyone. Due to that, all he could do was learn from books, which he had to borrow and return unnoticed, since there was nobody he could ask for help. When he read his first book on the breakdown of seals, he had been instantly hooked. It felt like genjutsu was in his blood. Which, he supposed, it was. He had started off with small introductory seals, like scroll sealing, and got the basics down almost instantly. It was only after he felt he truly understood seals that he started experimenting. Most of his experiments ended up with the seal blowing up. But some came out unexpectedly better than he had hoped. One being the seal he had created that allowed him to use the shadows to completely hide his presence while traveling in them. It came about when Naruto had created a seal that he had thought would allow him to control another's shadow, as he had seen the Nara clan do. Naruto had basic knowledge on the clans of Konoha, so he knew what their specialties in Kekkei Genkai were. He was annoyed at how much the villagers, and even other shinobi, relied on these clans, believing them to be unstoppable. Naruto wanted to be able to do their techniques in his own way to show the village that relying on a clan because of their Kekkei Genkai would be inane. Granted, the Uchiha and Hyuga clans had ninjutsus which could not be copied, but the clans were still overconfident because of them, and there were weaknesses to everything. Naruto didn't know what those weaknesses yet were, but he would be sure to figure them out. He wanted to pick apart the entire system Konoha had for relying too heavily on its clans, which were thought to be all-powerful. Naruto was on his 6th test seal when it happened. It was the first time he had mixed some of his blood in with the ink he used on the seal. He had placed the seal on the darkest part of a tree's shadow and, using a hand seal that he had come up with specifically for use, with his genjutsu mixed with the rat seal that Naruto knew the Naras used when performing this jutsu, said Fukin. Kajime no Jutsu. Naruto immediately felt his body being pulled into the shadow and his chakra blending with it. It felt so strange that he dropped his concentration and he was thrown from the shadow after the seal exploded. Naruto continued working with the same seal, tweaking it only slightly, until he polished it up enough for him to be satisfied, which took weeks. With anything new that he was learning, he wouldn't stop until he felt it was perfect, and he was incredibly judgmental about his work. Finally, Naruto figured out that if he placed the seal on himself instead of the shadow and concentrated enough, he was able to completely blend into the shadows. Not exactly what he was going for in the beginning, but he actually felt this was a really impressive and useful technique. Not to mention a good step in the direction he was trying to go in. After successfully staying in the shadows for 3 days straight, Naruto was able to decrease the amount of concentration it took to use the technique. He was just glad that he had so much chakra that he could continuously use it for the time it took to get used to the jutsu. He also tried something new by painting the seal used for shadow travel permanently on his right upper arm. It had burned like it was on fire for a few minutes, but it was definitely worth it. After that was a success, he also painted the one for sealing on his left forearm. Once he felt that he had complete control over the jutsu, which Naruto named Ryuk no Kage, he started using it as his constant form of travel, only wandering around the village enough without it to make sure that people knew that he was still around. He was also working on refining the Ryuk no Kage to where he could make the shadow he was in larger or smaller, connecting shadows, and the one he was having the most trouble with: teleporting between distant shadows. Naruto also began working on building his body's physical strength, speed, and stamina without the use of chakra and on basic taijutsu. He didn't use any weight seals, though he knew how to make them because he knew it would stunt his growth or damage his body if he used them at such a young age. Building strength, speed, and stamina was easy, but learning taijutsu from a book was pretty difficult. That was when Naruto started using his Ryuk no Kage to spy on other Konoha. From doing that, he was able to see the many different taijutsu styles that the clans and other shinobi used. Naruto tried doing all of them, finding a style of his own after incorporating elements from each of the styles he saw. He also started working on his Bukijutsu, using all forms of weapons, but mainly focusing on the dual blades that he had lifted from a weapon shop's garbage. The blades were once 2 full swords that had broken. Naruto had taken them home, leveled them to the same length and sharpened them. They were his favorite possessions. After training in Bukijutsu for a few hours, then switching straight to taijutsu after, Naruto slowly began mixing the two, which actually worked better with the dual blades for the type of taijutsu he was trying to refine. He began a schedule of working on Bukijutsu, moving into Kenjutsu, then finishing with taijutsu, getting his body used to doing one on its own, and being able to fluidly go between the others. Only after he felt that he was proficient enough with his Kenjutsu, Bukijutsu, Kenjutsu, and taijutsu did he start working on ninjutsu. He felt that a lot of shinobi relied too heavily on their ninjutsu, which was a mistake in his opinion. The Uchiha clan could copy any ninjutsu with their Sharingan and be able to block it. Some sensor-type shinobi could sense what kind of ninjutsu one was going to use, and any prolific kin user could put a chakra-suppressing seal on someone. Naruto was determined not to be caught off guard or vulnerable. He thought up every kind of possible situation where he couldn't do one or more type of a jutsu and made sure that he had backup plans and safeguards. Naruto didn't jump straight into performing and learning ninjutsu in the beginning. He first studied the introduction to chakra books. He learned how it works, what it does to and in the body, and about his chakra coils and points. Naruto was a firm believer in knowledge being power. If he knew the very basics about something, then he could build from that, making the jutsu easier to do and stronger in the long run, instead of diving head first into a jutsu and not really knowing what he was doing. That was how people blew themselves up or spent careless numbers of hours in chakra trying to figure something out when it had such a simpler answer if one began from the very beginning. With that in mind, Naruto's first point of focus was chakra control. He started out with the basic, keeping a leaf attached to his body with chakra, and then learned how to walk up trees and on water. He even taught himself to do some medical ninjutsu after reading some anatomy books just to make sure his control was perfect. Gaining full chakra control took a lot more time than he thought, almost 2 months of constant training, but he figured it must have been because he had such large chakra reserves. Once he felt he had full chakra control, he decided to try and learn some low-level jutsu using all the major nature manipulations. He thought that would be the best way to learn his affinity and also try building affinities towards other natures. He had read that full nature manipulation was so rare that the Sandaime was the only known person able to do it, but Naruto was determined to have them all the same, since his goal was to one day surpass the Hokage in power. Naruto didn't notice any real difference when using D-rank ninjutsu of varying nature manipulations. It was when he tried using some C-ranked one from a book that he swiped from a Chunin that it became apparent. Wind techniques seemed to take the least amount of chakra for him to do, while earth took the most. Since Naruto figured wind must be his affinity, he decided to work on the natures he did not have an affinity with first. As was Naruto's custom, he first read about how to mold his chakra into each element and what kind of reactions could occur when doing so. He also made sure to read books on physics and biology so that he could understand the very makeup of nature. Those books looked barely touched, much to his disappointment. If shinobi were going to use nature manipulation and transformations, they should understand what they were working with. By the time Naruto was 9, he had himself a healthy repertoire of B and C rank jutsu of varying nature manipulations. He decided not to learn any more until he perfected his favorites and was able to do them with very little or no hand seals. He felt that he needed to get his body and chakra more accustomed to the natures before going into the higher ranking ninjutsu. It was then that the Hokage suggested to Naruto, via letter, that he would like him to attend the academy. The Hokage wrote that he felt bad about Naruto being on his own all the time and that he should be around children his own age. The Hokage's real reason for enrolling Naruto into the academy, however, was because he was worried about how Naruto was able to just disappear and reappear whenever he felt like it. Even his crystal ball would not be able to find him. He knew that the villagers were much less than warm towards the boy and he hoped that Naruto wasn't planning anything or getting involved with anything dangerous. He thought that making some friends his age would discourage the boy from hating the village and turning into a potential threat. He made sure to tell Naruto the day before classes started, just in case he was indeed planning something. The Sandaime liked the boy and felt responsible for him, but he was the Hokage first and foremost, so the village's safety came first. Naruto did not want to go, since he knew everything that the academy could teach him already, and his skills far surpassed academy level anything. He knew that he could not refuse though, because there was definitely an underlying order in there for him to attend, not that it was just a suggestion like the letter read. Naruto did not want to waste his time or ruin his rigorous training schedule by going to classes, so he decided he wanted to try something new. He used Ryak no Cage to get to the river that flowed through the forest of death and began creating one of the most difficult seals he had ever done. He had to make it right the first time he executed it because it would take most of his chakra to do this and he didn't have time to experiment and recharge his chakra to retry like he usually did. It took Naruto 12 different tries on riding up the seal before he felt confident that it was the best he could do. He chopped off a large log from one of the trees in the area and placed his seal on top. He then cut his hand, putting some extra blood on the log, since Naruto had started mixing his blood in the ink for all of his seals to make the seals stronger and to give him more control when using them. He then took a large amount of mud and covered the log in it and put one hand over the seal, while the other did a half-ram seal and, pushing almost all of his chakra into the seal, said FanFiction. Kaikyoku Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto had noticed that there were clones for each of the different nature manipulations, but he had figured that a wood clone would be able to take more hits before it dispelled, since wood was so sturdy. He thought that mixing two natures would also make the clone even sturdier and, after thinking it through, decided that mud would be the best, considering they were both earth-based. Plus, the two-nature manipulation mixed with the seal should make anything less than a killing blow dispel it. The seal was also meant to lower the amount of chakra the clone was able to use so that it didn't run out. He would have spent more time perfecting and practicing creating the clone while going to class and then switch with it, but he didn't want to chance it. Naruto knew that there was no way to completely replicate his full personality into the clone, so going for a few days, then sending in a clone that seemed like a different person would definitely catch attention. Also, if there were any Haikas in the class, the clone would be able to fool them if they didn't study him too hard, but he was sure they would notice something different with his chakra coils and points if him and the clone switched places. The same if there was anyone from the Inuzuka clan. It was not so uncommon for someone to have a scent of wood when in Konoha and for a kid to smell like mud. They would probably just think that he had been playing outside a lot. But the original scent would not have such a distinct wood and mud smell. If there was someone from the Aburam clan, their insects would be able to smell the difference as well. So the only choice he had was to send the clone in his place from the very beginning. He looked over the clone carefully after it was formed, using the last of his energy to make sure everything looked alright. You are to go to the academy in my place and act as though you are the real Naruto. Stay in the village and only come to me when you have important information, if there is an emergency, or if you graduate, which is your goal. I have given you enough chakra that it should hold you for a few years if you use it sparingly. I want you to make sure people believe that you are not very smart or strong, and try to stay out of the way of the villagers. Understood? Naruto told the clone. Yosh. Dadabeo. Naruto clone yelled, bouncing on his feet and looking as though he hadn't been listening, before running off towards the village. Perfect. A dud. Naruto thought sullenly, before losing consciousness. Naruto knew that he could not return to the village while his clone was there, lest he gave himself away, and that would cause a lot of questions to be thrown at him. Maybe more than that, if they thought he was a threat. He had, after all, been spying on his fellow Konohinin, and that just looked bad on him if they found out, beside the fact that he would borrow books from other shinobi without them knowing about it. So after he woke up, he made his way back to his now permanent home under his tree in the Forest of Death. He had already gotten used to hunting and gathering for food there, so he knew that he could comfortably live there and not need to go into town to buy anything. Now that Naruto no longer had to go into town, he could finally test out the Kyuubi seal. He hadn't touched it yet, afraid of what might happen. He felt that he knew enough about seals that he wouldn't inadvertently release the Bijk, but he didn't know what kind of change him or his chakra would undergo if introduced to the Kyuubis. He had tried all he could to find anything about his seal, but he hadn't been able to find anything like it in all the books he read or the information he got from others, so he thought that testing it out directly was the only option. From what he could tell of the seal, there were layers to it. Naruto figured if he could just release the first layer, that should be enough for him to access the Kyuubi, but not affect him too much. He had read and heard about the Gajumfkin and its corresponding Gajumkain, but it was only brushed upon in the books, and who he had heard it from wasn't an expert with it. From what he could decipher, he thought he could try out the Gajumkain and see if it did anything. He would only use a little chakra to be sure that if it did work, he didn't unlock too much of the seal. Naruto focused a small amount of chakra onto his fingertips, took a deep breath, and quickly pressed his fingers onto the seal, with his fingers spread so that they touched some of the outer layers. The pain in his body the moment he did it was so intense that it caused him to black out. Naruto awoke to find himself laying on his back in what looked like a sewer with pipes on the ceiling and walls. There was about 5 inches of water churning around him violently, and it seemed like the walls and pipes were pulsing uncontrollably. Without moving, he did a quick scan of his surroundings but didn't see anything else. He couldn't feel the water soaking him, but he could feel the tremendous amount of malicious chakra around him, which was originating from the end of the hallway. Naruto got up slowly and started making his way towards where the power was coming from. Naruto was surprised at his mind's natural defense. The only thing here was the Kyuubi. He wondered if that was an Uzumaki clan trait or if it was just something that all Jinchuriki had as a way of making sure that nobody could control him and thus the Bijk inside. Perhaps it was part of the seal that kept the Kyuubi in check. Either way, he had to make some sort of defense for the Kyuubi as well. It wouldn't be good if someone could just waltz into his mind and easily get to the Kyuubi, even if Naruto himself wouldn't be affected. At the end of the tunnel was a cavernous room housing a cage with gates that went from the ceiling to the floor. About halfway up the gates, Naruto saw the seal used to contain the Kyuubi within. Naruto slowly approached the gates and, while waiting for the Kyuubi to approach him, studied the seal. After a considerable pause, Naruto felt the air in the room shift and heard the Kyuubi moving. Naruto could feel the power rolling off the Bijkin waves. He had never felt power so strong. Naruto was almost choking on the amount of malicious chakra coming from the cage. Before the Kikbi was able to finally lay eyes on his container, Naruto did the only thing he felt right doing when meeting with such a powerful being. He kneeled with one knee on the ground, placing the fist of the same side next to it and his other hand on the knee bent pointing upwards, head down in the traditional pose that shinobi gave to their commanding officer. It took the Kikbi a minute before he could say anything. Truthfully, he was surprised. No human, especially his Jinchuriki, had ever kneeled before him. They usually just barged into his space, demanding power, or they would just leave him alone completely. The Kikbi started getting excited, though he did not show it. Perhaps this one can be used. I still cannot control him due to this damnable seal, but I may be able to coerce him into removing it enough for me to take over. I see that you recognize true power, human. The Kikbi said, looking down at Naruto. What has brought you to me before the prearranged time within this seal? The Kikbi knew what the seal was meant for. It had already started adding very nominal amounts of his chakra into the boy's pathways, but only enough for his body to get used to it. There were still supposed to be years before the seal released its first layer. I wish to make a partnership of sorts. Naruto said, still from his kneeling position, thinking quickly. He did not know that he would be meeting the beast when he tested the seal, but he knew that this meeting could turn out in his favor if he played his cards right. He knew that the Kikbi would not be happy with his request, but he was going to try and do this the best way he could in order to be on good terms with the Bijk. I do not partner with humans. The Kikbi growled angrily. The human was not displaying any signs of fear, and the Kikbi had to decide if he should try and scare the human into obedience or if it would give it willingly. The Kikbi could not tell what was in this human child's mind. It both annoyed and fascinated him. He had never met a human he could not read, and this one before him was quite the enigma. I said of sorts, Naruto replied. I know from studying the seal that the layers are meant to be released at certain points, and this will allow your chakra to start flowing through me. It already has. The Kikbi interrupted. Yes, and I apologize for that, but I did not know any other way to speak with you without removing that first layer. Naruto said. The Kikbi narrowed his eyes at his container but did not speak, wishing the human to get to the point. I did not wish to simply take your chakra from you, again, my apologies that it is already happening. I first wanted to ask you for your chakra. I feel that everyone should become strong using their own power, not someone else's, but seeing as how we really have no choice in the matter, I see no other option unfortunately. You are asking to use my chakra. The Kikbi stated, more than asked. Yes, this human was certainly the most confusing that he had ever come across. Yes. Naruto replied. The Kikbi looked up at the area he knew the seal was at. It was not as if he could say no and his chakra would stay with him. The human was going to get his chakra anyways, whether the Kikbi wanted it or not. Very well. The Kikbi said, beginning to turn back into the darkness of the cage. Also, Naruto stated, for the first time sounding hesitant, which made the Kikbi turn back to him, curious, I was wondering if you would be willing to share some of your knowledge with me. I have no family or sensei to teach me anything, and although I feel I have been able to come far, considering my situation, I believe that knowledge is the truest and most dangerous kind of power, and I can only get so far with the books in the library. Now the Kikbi was really intrigued. Most humans didn't find knowledge to mean much of anything, which was misguided on their part. It seemed like this human child recognized the power that knowledge could bring. Why do you desire knowledge? The Kikbi asked. I wish to bring about change. Naruto simply said. Continue. The Kikbi said while narrowing his eyes in annoyance. The way the village is now is deficient. The villagers are stupid and lazy, believing they are safe when at any moment they could be wiped out. The shinobi here have gotten arrogant, believing they can handle anything that could happen when it has already been proven by you that they cannot. They rely heavily on the clans that reside within these walls, whom they seem to believe are omnipotent. Even the clans think that way about themselves. I want to show the village their miscalculation. I want them to know that they are not nearly as powerful as they believe. I want to show them true power so they will absolutely understand it. Naruto finished, with slight anger and bitterness in his voice. Oh yes, the Kikbi was definitely happy with his new container. He wondered if the human could hear the beginnings of insanity in his own voice. All of the things the human child listed were things that the Kikbi himself felt. He briefly wondered if he had already been influencing the child through the seal, but disregarded the thought. The seal was unfortunately foolproof against that. This container was definitely going to work for him. If the child wasn't still kneeling in front of him, the Kikbi would have laughed at his luck. I allow you to use my chakra as you see fit. It is your responsibility to access it and control it. It will not be my fault, nor will I help if you go too far with it. As for the knowledge, I will offer it when, and if, I feel like doing so. The Kikbi said, returning to the darkness of the cage. Thank you. Naruto said, finally standing up after he could no longer hear the Kikbi moving. Naruto was unsure of how to return to his body, so he decided to do a chakra pulse, in hopes that it would jolt him awake, which it certainly did. The moment he returned to his body, he regretted it. It felt as though hundreds of shards of glass were shredding up his body from the inside. The pain was so immense that he couldn't move and tears starting flowing from his eyes. It truly felt like he was dying. Naruto now realized why the seal was set up the way it was. The first layer was meant to loosen once his chakra coils had finished developing, and he had unsealed it before then. He knew the only thing he could do was try his best not to fight the invading chakra of the Kyuubi. If he did, it would take a lot longer for his coils to get used to it. He just hoped he would actually live through it. It took half an hour of excruciating pain before Naruto was able to move again. It took another day and a half until the pain had completely receded. It was only then that he attempted to access his chakra. His body felt as if it was burning for a few minutes, but the longer Naruto drew upon the chakra, the more his body got used to it. Once the burning feeling had gone away, Naruto decided to try out how much the Kyuubi's chakra interfered with his control by trying the simple leaf test. The second Naruto tried to push the small amount of chakra required into the palm of his hand to make the leaf stick there, the leaf blew up in a fiery explosion that left Naruto's hand with third-degree burns, which began healing almost immediately. Well, shit, Naruto thought angrily, I have to start all over again. A sudden surge of rage made him take his frustration out on a skin-enhanced dummy he had created until he felt calm and clear-headed again. And my emotions are affected too. Just great. Best start from the beginning. Again. Naruto began collecting a pile of leaves and, as an afterthought, put on some shinobi-grade fingerless gloves. Better safe than burned. Chapter 2. It had taken Naruto 3 years to finally get full control of his chakra again. He had also loosened the seal 3 times and felt that going any further would cause him to lose control of himself. As it was, the third time he loosened it, the Kyuubi had actually taken over for a brief moment. It took all of Naruto's willpower to overcome the Kyuubi, but now he could handle up to 5 tails. He constantly had to hold back the malicious chakra and killing intent that would roll off him and also control his emotions, which had become more volatile. Naruto had to relearn his chakra control every time that he loosened the seal, but felt that if he were to do it again, it would only take a short time for him to regain control. He had finally realized why releasing a layer of the seal messed up his chakra control. Naruto's chakra before infusing with the Kyuubi's was only slightly unstable since his coils were still developing, whereas the Kyuubi's would ebb and flow through his system. Sometimes there would be a large burst of it and sometimes it would be just a small amount more than his own. Naruto had finally gotten his coils to stop pulsating the Kyuubi's chakra and now had fully developed larger coils that kept a consistent amount of his chakra flowing through them that had started to fuse with the Kyuubi's. During that time, Naruto had also perfected his own method of taijutsu and kinjutsu. He had also advanced to where he could use the few ninjutsu he favored with only one hand seal. Working on his genjutsu had been the hardest. You could know the breakdown of genjutsu, but without a proper sensei to teach you how to do it, it was impossible to do. Oddly enough, that was where the Kyuubi stepped in and started instructing him and giving him some pointers, not to mention incredibly violent and gory ideas. Since releasing the seal the second time, Naruto and the Kyuubi were able to converse with each other telepathically, which was more of a blessing than a burden, as Naruto had found out in this case. The Kyuubi had started out calling him names and yelling at him when Naruto had first started trying his genjutsu out on a clone. After the botched genjutsu attempt, the Kyuubi had started actively including himself in all of Naruto's training, even going so far as to actually give him some jutsu. With the help of Kyuubi's chakra running through him, Naruto was also able to master fire nature manipulation. Naruto was in the middle of learning Kaiten Hinoiki, which was a modified version of one of Kyuubi's own attacks that the Kyuubi was teaching him when he felt his clone approaching quickly. He had to immediately cut off the jutsu lest his clone run straight into the fire. Kami, I really did screw this one up. Naruto thought. First, his clone almost runs straight into its own death or, well, dispelment, then when he stops in front of the original, he was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit and ridiculous-looking goggles on his head. Naruto didn't even know they sold anything like that in Konoha. Of course, he wouldn't have been able to buy it either way. All of the things Naruto owned were taken from garbage cans and fixed up, except for his ink, which he made himself. Naruto wondered how his clone could have gotten from the moss green short-sleeved shirt, black shinobi pants, and black sandals that he was created in that matched the original's clothing to that. His thoughts on his clone's appearance left his mind when he saw the look of utter excitement in his clone's eyes. Izuki-sensei is so awesome. You won't believe what he told me. I never would have thought, since Iruka-sensei is usually the only one that pays attention to me, but that's the clone began, talking quickly and animatedly, with his hands flying and feet bouncing when Naruto cut him off, rubbing his head. What are you here for? I told you to only come here if there was an emergency or when you graduate. That's what I'm saying, Dadabeo. The clone said loudly. This is my chance to graduate. I could never create a clone, which was what we needed to pass, so Mizuki-sensei said that he knew a way that I could graduate besides that. He said if I take the scroll of sealing from Jiji's house and learn something from it, I could graduate. Naruto contemplated destroying his clone for its stupidity. Obviously this Mizuki-sensei was trying to get his clone to steal the scroll from the Hokage's home so that he could take it from his idiotic clone scot-free. He assumed that this Jiji was the Hokage since his home was the only place the scroll would be. But then he thought more about it. This could actually be good. If he were to get his hands on that scroll, he could learn some really powerful jutsu. And it would be simple to set up this Mizuki if he was as stupid as he sounded. You think that you could get this scroll from the Hokage? Naruto asked his clone. Of course, Dadabeo. I know his weakness. The clone said with a fist pump. Naruto highly doubted his clone actually knew the Hokage's weakness, but the clone was still a part of himself, if only slightly, and should have enough skill to at least get a scroll. Especially if this Mizuki had already subdued the guards, which he was sure to have done in order to let Naruto's clone get to the Hokage's home uninterrupted. Alright. Quickly go and get it, then find a hidden spot to look it over. I will be there when you get back. Naruto told his clone. The clone was as simple as he thought. It didn't even wonder how the original was going to know where it was coming back to. Before the clone could run off, Naruto used Ryuk no Kage to enter his clone's shadow, following him to the Hokage's residence. As Naruto had thought, all of the guards were laying around outside, though he doubted his clone noticed since it climbed through a window on the top floor. He could still smell the lingering scent of a poison in the air, which meant that it was just recently used. He recognized it as a non-lethal one, luckily for the perpetrator. Killing the guards of the Hokage's home would get him caught immediately. The suits they wear have a seal on them that is directly connected to their heartbeat. Once their heart stops beating, a red alert is sounded to all high-level shinobi, all of whom would surround the residence within seconds. So the traitor Mizuki wasn't as dim as his clone, at least. Naruto was curious to see how his clone was going to subdue the Hokage. The second his clone opened the door from the room they entered into to the hallway, he actually held his breath in anticipation. Overpowering the Hokage was out of the question. The only thing his clone could do was somehow distract the Hokage. Using the knocked-out shinobi outside would be the best option, but they would have to move fast if they did that. The Hokage might even set off the alarm before the clone could finish speaking, which would make it impossible to get the scroll. That's why Naruto was there. If his clone could get the Hokage out of the house, or even just further away from where it was, but could not make it to the room that housed the scroll, Naruto could use the shadows to get into the room and get it himself. He hoped there would be enough confusion that he would be able to escape with it unimpeded. Naruto. What are you doing here? The Sandai masked with confusion on his face when he saw the clone in the hallway. Warwick no Jutsu. Naruto could almost feel the heat on his face. That was the most humiliating thing he had ever seen. His clone actually transformed into a naked woman. Not only that, it actually knocked the Hokage out from a nosebleed. He couldn't believe that worked. Nor could he believe that his clone would do something as horrendous as transforming itself into a woman. He hoped that was the first time his clone had used that technique or that nobody else had seen it do it. The Naruto clone then made its way to the room the traitor had told him about. Once in, Naruto moved from his clone's shadow into the shadows of the room, looking around. He saw a couple of smaller scrolls that immediately caught his attention, since one had the Uzumaki clan symbol on it and another his name, so he took those and replaced them with blank scrolls from his seal. He would find a way to return them later, after he had either copied or memorized what was in them. He placed the scrolls in the seal on his arm and jumped back into his clone's shadow, just as it was leaving the room with a scroll of sealing on its back. Once in the safety of a forest in one of the training grounds, Naruto left his clone's shadow and appeared in front of it. Let's see what we have here. He thought to himself, taking the scroll from the clone's back. Yosh. I did it, Dadabeo. I bested Jiji. I am on my way to taking his place. His clone yelled, dancing around the small clearing. Naruto was too busy studying the jutsu in the scroll to hear what his clone had said. He quickly looked over everything there was in the scroll. All that it said about any of the jutsu in there was how to do the technique and the risks. It didn't say much about what they did, just giving the basic cues for it. Naruto shrugged his shoulders and focused on the first one. The Taj Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. It was surprisingly easy to do, but he supposed it was because he had been making clones for years and this one wasn't too different. It just took more chakra and a different hand seal. Once he was able to create hundreds of clones easily, he dispelled all but 8 clones. He had each of the remaining clones copy down a jutsu from the scroll while he read the next one after the Taj Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, which was the Chakra no Nawa. It allowed the user to form its chakra into a rope that is unable to be cut. Naruto couldn't understand why this was forbidden, but he guessed that maybe it was because perfect chakra control was needed and it could cause death from chakra depletion if not done properly. While his clones were copying down their jutsu and his original clone was still dancing around and singing some absurd song that Naruto was ignoring, he got down to learning how to mold his chakra out of his body and into the form of a rope. It wasn't long before Naruto sensed a chakra signature coming their way. Naruto melted into the shadows while his clones were just finishing their copies. Once the clones had finished, they gave the copies they made to Naruto, while his original clone closed up a scroll and put it on his back and then dispelled. The second they did, Naruto understood why they were forbidden, besides needing large amounts of chakra. All the information his clones had copied was now in his head. He didn't even need the copies anymore. Oh, this is definitely useful. Naruto thought to himself, elated that things had worked so well in his favor. Perhaps his defective clone wasn't as inadequate as he had initially thought. Ideas for the uses of the Cage Bunshin starting bombarding his mind even as he watched the pursuer reach his clone. "Naruto!" The pursuer yelled at his clone. Even though they were not going after him, Naruto tensed, ready for battle. "Iruka-sensei. I did it. I learned a technique from the scroll. So do I pass? Am I a genin now?" The Naruto clone asked the dark-skinned man with the scar across his nose that had jumped into the clearing. "So this is not the traitor?" Naruto thought to himself. "The second one I feel nearing must be the one then." "What do you mean? Who told you that?" Iruka asked the clone. "Mizuki-sensei. He said that if I learned a technique from the scroll, then I would pass. Did I say that? I don't remember what I said. Either way, you served your purpose. Now hand over the scroll," Mizuki said, jumping out of the brush. Naruto made sure to get a good look at the traitor and continued focusing on him instead of his clone and the other shinobi for any sign of attack. It would seem that neither of the two shinobi could sense him, so Naruto determined that they must not be any higher than Chunin. They were most likely Chunin though, since neither of them immediately went to attack and instead started talking. Only Chunin and Genin would stand around chatting during such a time. Chunin and Anbu would attack first, ask later. Naruto watched in boredom as the traitor continued speaking to the Naruto clone and Iruka. Throwing out insults at the clone and stating his plans for getting away with the scroll while blaming Naruto for stealing it. Also spewing out the truth about Naruto and calling him a demon. This is getting ridiculous. Who stands there telling people their plans like that? And why isn't the other Chunin doing anything? Just fight already. Naruto thought. This has got to be the second most absurd thing he had seen, right behind that abominable jutsu his clone had used earlier. It was only after Mizuki told the Naruto clone that Iruka hated him that the traitor finally made his move, but Naruto had seen the attack coming and was prepared. Mizuki threw his Kuma shuriken that was on his back at the Naruto clone which Iruka quickly covered with his body. Before the shuriken reached Iruka and his clone, Naruto sent out his chakra rope, making it as thin as possible in order to not be seen, through the center of the weapon, causing it to slow down so that it didn't go into Iruka's back too far. Though Naruto was a safe distance from the three, he could still hear Iruka telling his clone that he didn't hate him. "Touching?" Naruto thought sarcastically. Naruto watched his clone look up at Iruka and then run off. "Oh good Kami," Naruto thought, immediately taking off after his now crying clone. He was most certainly dispelling that thing when he had the chance. Once he was close enough, he shot his hand out of the shadow, grabbing onto the ankle of his clone, which caused it to face plant onto the ground. "Where do you think you're going?" Naruto whispered to his clone. "I'm leading Mizuki-sensei away from Iruka-sensei. I don't want him getting hurt anymore," the clone said, sniffling. "That's very nice and all, but you are aware that for the traitor's plan to work, he has to kill your Iruka-sensei, right?" Naruto said slowly so that his clone would understand. It seemed that the clone did because his eyes got large and he wiped away the tears, looking around the forest. "They're coming, don't worry. Just be quiet and wait for the right time," Naruto told his clone, melting back into the shadows. And just as he disappeared into the shadows, what looked to be Naruto came barreling out of the brush to stop just behind the tree they were next to, closely followed by Mizuki. "Clever," Naruto thought, looking at the Naruto facing off Mizuki. Naruto watched as more talking and insults were thrown with a silent sigh before Iruka cancelled the transformation. Only then did the fight commence. Naruto was very unimpressed. Neither the traitor nor Iruka seemed to be very strong. Not only that, but neither used any ninjutsu or taijutsu. All they did was throw weapons at each other. It looked like Iruka was losing horribly and was going to be killed. He saw his clone, out of the corner of his eye, put his hands in the seal for the Cage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto raised his eyebrows in surprise, but quickly touched the clone and transferred just enough chakra into it for it to be able to pull off the jutsu. So that was what the clone was dancing around and singing when he and the other clones were working on the scroll. "Don't you dare touch Iruka-sensei." All of the Naruto clones yelled, jumping all at once onto Mizuki. Naruto was impressed but wouldn't dare admit it at the way the clones pummeled the traitor. He himself would have killed the man, but it was best that his clone did it and let the man live. In a way, it was his clone's fight, and having the traitor alive would prove his innocence after the man was interrogated. Once the unconscious traitor was tied up, Naruto watched as the severely wounded Iruka gave the clone his headband and told him that he had passed. Naruto silently crept away, relieved that the evening had gone so well. Chapter 3. Naruto felt more comfortable in the forest than he ever did in his apartment. Since he began living there, Naruto had become accustomed to the environment. He actually felt a kind of connection with it. He had developed a bond with some of the animals in the forest, such as the bears and tigers, which he would sometimes hunt with, as they had started treating him like one of their own. That might have been due to the Kyuubi's influence, but he still felt it was partly him. He even got to practice his medical ninjutsu on them when they got hurt. He was also able to hone his sensing abilities since it was crawling with creatures. He could only sense things in his immediate vicinity, but it was much better than before, and he was attempting to expand how far he could sense. So it was with a resigned sigh that he made his way back to his forest home to start packing up his belongings. Now that he was a genin, it was time he dispelled his clone and moved back into town. He still had until tomorrow to prepare himself for being around people again. As he was approaching it, however, he could feel that someone else was already there. The chakra signature was familiar, and it seemed like whoever was there was waiting for him, so he came out of his shadow and approached slowly. When his tree came into view he saw the woman, Anko he remembered, sitting on top of the roots which made up the roof of his house. "Congrats," she said, looking at him. It was with a start that he realized she must have known about him and been watching him this whole time. But he hadn't been able to tell at all. "How did you know?" he asked tensely with a deep frown. "The snakes," she said, holding up her arm that had previously been hidden from him, that had a snake curled around it. Naruto wanted to smack his head at his negligence. Of course. He thought angrily, snake summons. That was why some of the snakes seemed so strange. "I won't be making that mistake again. Thanks for the warning," Naruto said angrily to the Kyuubi. "It seemed inconsequential and I am not your radar for such things. You should have figured it out yourself." The Kyuubi responded, annoyed. "So? Did you want something?" Naruto asked, preparing for a fight. He did not sense any killing intent coming from her, but that didn't mean she was not looking for a fight. "Depends. Did you find out anything useful?" she pointedly asked, showing him the back of her neck. Naruto's eyes narrowed at what he recognized there. So she was asking him if anything about the cursed seal of heaven was in the scroll of sealing. "I might have seen something. I'll need some time to work it out, though," he told her. Anko nodded and stood up. "Later," she said with a wink and a grin, turning around with her hand held up and parting before disappearing into the woods. Naruto stomped angrily under the roots and started sealing up everything into his arm seal, trying to calm himself. He did not like being caught off guard. Once everything was sealed, except for his bedding, he created some shadow clones and started training. "That only worked when I didn't know what it was," Naruto said out loud after he had finished training the next morning. The snake that was in the branches above him jerked then, with a poof, disappeared back to where it came from, having its place taken by Anko. "Looks like you've learned some pretty strong jutsu, but do you think you could use them well in a fight?" Anko asked mockingly. Naruto just snorted in response. "Let's test that out, shall we? It's been a while since I had a good fight and it looks like you could give me one," she said with a vicious smirk, cracking her knuckles. "Yes, but you're a Chunin and I'm just a genin. That's a big difference in skill," Naruto said with his own smirk, getting into a defensive stance. "The tails," she replied with a shrug before charging him. Naruto was starting to like this one. He could feel the Kyuubi agree. It was later that day that his clone came to find the area demolished. Trees were uprooted and destroyed, the ground was covered in small craters, and there was smoke still lingering from scorched areas. Walking through the destruction, the clone found his creator, lying on his back on the ground, spread eagle style with his clothes burned, cut, and stained with blood, watching the sunset. The only indication Naruto gave to his clone to acknowledge its presence was shifting his eyes in its direction momentarily, before looking back at the sun. "Lose a fight?" his clone asked, sitting next to him. "She'd like to think so. But it was more of a draw," Naruto replied. He heard the Kyuubi snort. He had most certainly lost, though the Kyuubi was still impressed. His Jinchuriki did better than he thought it would against someone with as much skill as the woman had. His Jinchuriki had held up well against her, for the most part, and he didn't even use any of the Kyuubi's chakra. "Our sensei is Hada Kakashi," his clone told him. Naruto sat up in excitement. He couldn't have been luckier. Kakashi was one of the strongest shinobi in the village, and there was a lot Naruto could learn from him. He apparently values teamwork above all else. His clone continued with a grimace. Naruto cocked his eyebrow in question. "He made us do some ridiculous bell test to test our teamwork. Told us something breaking rules or trash, something abandoning comrades or worse. I wasn't really listening." Naruto couldn't help it, he rolled his eyes. His clone had a serious listening problem. But we passed, so it's cool. Who else graduated? Naruto asked, preparing to learn all he needed from his clone. There's Haruno Sakura, she's the best. Haika Hinata, Nara Shikamaru, Inyazuka Kiba, Akamichi Chinjai, Aburam Shino, Yamanaka Ino, she's Sakura's best friend, and that bastard Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto's clone growled the last name. Naruto's face had gone into a deeper frown the more names his clone said, and gone the deepest with the last name. He failed to notice the Kikbi bristle slightly at hearing the name Uchiha. Naruto was not surprised that Yamanaka, Nara, and Akamichi would all be in the same class together, since their families were close and they would want to continue their clan's formation, but for a child from all the major clans to be in the same class was disconcerting, especially for the last member of the Uchiha clan to be lumped in there too. Perhaps there was a law enacted that forced them to have children at the same time. But that seemed excessive. He didn't think that anyone could force someone to get impregnated at a specific time. But they might be persuaded to without them noticing. It made him wonder if the Hokage wasn't as ignorant about the clans as he seemed. If a child from each of the clans were put on teams together, they would be forced to work together and know each other's strengths and weaknesses. It would make them realize that their clans were not supreme. Seems you don't like the Uchiha, but you have feelings for the Haruno girl. Naruto stated to his clone, intrigued. He was unaware that his clone would be able to have strong feelings towards people. Seems there were some good portions of the seal he made to create the clone. It's going to be an interesting team. Yup. One day Sakura-chan will realize that I'm better than that jerk Sasuke and she'll get over him and go out with me. And that bastard Sasuke is my rival. I'm definitely gonna beat that asshole into the dirt. The clone yelled in exuberance. Wait, how did you know they were my teammates? They decided teams by grades. Do you know everyone's grades? That may be the case in normal circumstances, but this is highly unusual. They wouldn't separate the Inoshika CHM team, so they will all be together. The Haika, Inyazuka, and Aburam will be together, since they are from the other prominent clans, and the heads of their clans would want them with another member of a clan. That leaves me, the Haruno girl, who is a civilian, and the Uchiha, whom isn't really a member of a prominent clan anymore, since he is the last of his, to be on a team together. The throwaways. Naruto thought to himself, only slightly annoyed. It did make sense after all. A look of comprehension came over his clone's face. So does it happen now? His clone asked quietly, looking down at its hands, clasped tightly together in its lap. Naruto turned to his clone and nodded. Can you promise me something? I was going around telling everyone I was going to be the Hokage someday, you know. His clone said, with a far-off look in its eyes. Well, it was more than that. I was actually promising everyone that I would do it. Could you keep that promise for me? Naruto sat in silence for a while. When he thought about it, it wasn't so bad of an idea. Naruto had thought to just be powerful enough to be Anbu captain or someone of great influence. But he would have much more power as the Hokage. The power to actually make some real changes to the village that were long overdue. He would just have to add learning politics into his routine. I can do that. He promised with a nod. His clone gave him a reassured smile. Thanks. It said before Naruto dispelled it. We should have used it as a training dummy. The Kikbi said. It would have dispelled when I ripped its tongue out. Besides, you only say that because you enjoy seeing the shit get kicked out of what looks like me. Naruto accused. He didn't get a reply. The next day found Naruto meeting with his team for the first time. It was also the day of their first mission. He had arrived at the pre-arranged meeting place to find his teammates already there waiting. Naruto knew that Kakashi was habitually late due to visiting the graves of his deceased teammates. He had seen him there on many an occasion. Naruto? You're late. A pink-haired girl yelled at him, attempting to punch him in the head. Naruto blocked her punch with his arm. Usually, if someone were to attack him like that he would attack back, but he assumed this was some sort of greeting of hers, odd as it was. Apologies. He simply said without feeling, moving away from her and the Uchiha to lean on a tree with his arms crossed. His other two teammates stared at him with surprise in their eyes. They had also just realized that he was not wearing his usual orange jumpsuit. The Uchiha was about to say something when Kakashi showed up. Naruto had been sure to arrive just before their sensei so that he could spend some time training instead of waiting around. He had sent a Kage Bunshin to watch Kakashi and dispel when he was on his way. Sorry I'm late. There were these bandits and Naruto, what are you wearing? Kakashi asked with surprise. 3 sets of eyes turned to Naruto in unison. Clothes? He replied. He was wearing his usual moss green short-sleeved shirt and black shinobi pants and sandals, but he was also wearing a black trench coat which housed all of his weapons except for his dual blades which were in the seal on his arm. The trench coat and slouch he was utilizing were to hide the fact that he was taller than his clone had been by a couple of inches and that he was also more muscular than it had been. He had changed the cloth on his hit IA to a longer black one and tied it around his forehead. Yes, but what happened to the Kakashi made a waving hand gesture in his direction. Orange. Naruto just shrugged in response. He knew that his clone had acted differently than him, but he would be damned if he acted as brainless as it did. He felt agreement from the Kyuubi. "Naruto, are you okay?" Sakura asked, with real worry in her voice, slowly approaching him. He looked to her momentarily before dodging 5 shuriken that were thrown at him and grabbing the foot of the Uchiha when he tried to kick him. "It's an impostor." The Uchiha yelled, backing away from Naruto with a kunai in hand. Naruto just sighed. "Itaki-sensei, would you please tell Uchiha-san that I am not an impostor?" he said, looking to his sensei. They all jerked at how he addressed Kakashi and Sasuke. Well, Sasuke continued to try and fight Naruto with renewed vigor, if you can call that fighting. Naruto thought, internally rolling his eyes. Pathetic, he heard the Kyuubi add. Kakashi removed his hit I-8 from his Sharingan and activated it, looking at Naruto with it. "It's the real Naruto," he said with shock in his voice, covering back up his Sharingan. He had thought that it was an impostor as well. But how Naruto knew about the Sharingan and what it could do, he was curious to find out. Kakashi narrowed his eyes. As well as everything else that Naruto was hiding. "I think you have some explaining to do. I think we have a mission to do." Naruto shot back calmly. Their eyes widened slightly in remembrance. They had been so distracted by the changes within Naruto that they had completely forgotten about their first mission. "Right, well after, then," Kakashi said, giving him a serious look. Naruto just nodded and pushed off from the tree to head to Hokage Tower to get their mission briefing. Everyone followed after him, staring at his back tentatively. Well, the Haruno girl was staring at his back tentatively. He could feel the glare from Kakashi and the Uchiha trying to burn a hole in his back. Naruto just sighed internally. "This is definitely going to suck," he thought. "Good work everyone," the Hokage told them after their latest mission. He glanced at Kakashi and they had one of their silent conversations which Naruto was able to pick up on easily. They seemed to be having those after every mission briefing. "Notice anything?" the Hokage's look asked. He had been surprised with Naruto's sudden change as well and had told Kakashi to keep a close eye on him. Only the usual odd behavior. He still hasn't used any real skills yet. Kakashi's answering look said. "Think we should test him? That would be best." The Hokage hummed out loud before nodding to himself. "Well, I know that it is unusual for a new genin team such as yourselves to do anything but D-rank missions, but you have shown exceptional knowledge and skills, so I think it should be alright to give you a C-rank mission," the Hokage said with a smile. Naruto refrained from rolling his eyes, keeping his face blank. So blatant. He thought to himself. "It's a protection mission. Tazuna-san, could you please come in here?" the Hokage asked. The man that walked in had a grumpy look on his face with the body of a hard worker that drank and ate just a bit too much. The hair on his head and goatee were both light gray. He pushed the glasses further onto his nose before taking a swig out of the bottle he had in his hand as approached Team 7. "What, this is it? Kids?" he asked with obvious annoyance. Sasuke glared at the man. "You'd better be good." Chapter 4. The second they set out from Konoha the next morning, Naruto felt 2 shinobi watching them from the trees. He decided to wait and see what they were up to before attacking them. Kakashi was keeping a close eye on him and he didn't want to give away too much yet. He had even finally activated his weight seals so that he would move slower. He knew they were to head east to get to Mizuno Kuni, but decided to walk in the back of the group, hoping to avoid conversation. When they came across a puddle on the road, Naruto saw Kakashi glance at it, signifying that he had noticed as well. Naruto had to decide if he wanted to do anything or just let Kakashi handle it. By the time Naruto had come up to the puddle, he had deduced that it wouldn't hurt anything if he messed with the puddle a bit. He purposely splashed his foot down onto the puddle. The second his foot touched the surface of the puddle, he shot his chakra out through the bottom of it in the form of a spike. Naruto had the idea from the Chakura no Nawa that if his chakra could form a rope, it could also form in other ways and had been practicing. Kakashi turned around the second he heard the splash to see Naruto take his now wet foot off the puddle. "Didn't splash as much as I thought it would," Naruto said in a deadpan voice. By now the rest of the entourage had turned around to look at him. He felt the shift behind him and jumped quickly to where the rest of his group were as 2 shinobi rose from the puddle, blood staining their chests. "That hurt, you little bastard," they yelled in unison. "Oops," Naruto said in the same voice. He felt more than saw Kakashi move from behind him. The next second he was behind the 2 shinobi. He shoved both of their heads together, knocking them out. He then proceeded to tie them up. After making sure they were secured properly, he turned to Tazuna. "Why would shinobi from Kurigakure be here? It almost seemed like they were waiting for us, but if they were after any of us shinobi, they couldn't have known that we would be leaving the village. I wonder who they were after," Kakashi said, seemingly rhetorically. Tazuna had the decency to look ashamed. "Couldn't afford more than a C-rank mission?" Naruto asked with his back slightly turned away from the group. Tazuna jumped in surprise and then looked down in guilt. "We can handle it. We should continue. Naruto said, looking at Kakashi calmly. Naruto knew that Kakashi was thinking about heading back and giving the mission to more advanced Konohinin. Kakashi stared back for a moment before smiling. Right, we finished the mission. Kakashi confirmed, nodding. They continued on in silence before coming across a boat waiting for them at the edge of the water. Once on the boat, Tazuna told them about the ruthless and wealthy businessman that was after his life for trying to build a bridge meant to bring trade into the country. So it's all political. Naruto thought. Getting involved in this should give me some good insight for future reference. Once landing in Tazuna's hometown, Naruto felt an aura he had never encountered before. The killing intent from one of the chakra signatures he felt was so strong, he was actually impressed. What do you reckon? Naruto asked the Kyuubi. We can probably take him if you go all out, but he's about the level of the one with that damnable eye. It would certainly give yourself away if you engaged him. The Kyuubi responded. Naruto had noticed that the Kyuubi seemed uncomfortable when Kakashi had used the Sharingan on him before to check if he was the real Naruto. So he figured the Kyuubi had a reason to not like that eye, and Naruto knew not to ask him anything. The Kyuubi would tell Naruto if he felt it necessary, but if not, he wouldn't say a word. I may not be able to fight, but if Kakashi engages this guy, it's going to be quite a show. Naruto couldn't help it. He was itching to see what Sharingan no Kakashi could do. With his back to the others, he looked straight at where he felt the chakra signature and gave an evil grin. That seemed to set off whoever was there because there was a shift in the air before what looked to be a large sword came flying at them. Everyone down. Kakashi yelled while everyone hit the ground, Sasuke taking Tazuna down with him. The sword embedded itself in the tree next to them and the attacker appeared, standing on it. Naruto got a good look before his heart started racing. He knew who this was from sneaking a peek at Konoha's bingo book. Kurigakure's missing Nin Mamachi's Abusa. Demon of the Hidden Mist and one of the 7 shinobi swordsmen of the mist. He looked down at the sword the man was standing on, curious to see what one of the most famous swords in all the countries looked like. It was a massive cleaver with a hole near the end of the blade. Although there was information on some of the 7 swordsmen, it was only the ones that became missing Nin, and there wasn't really much on the swords. Kakashi didn't know how, but he knew that Naruto was no genin level shinobi, even barring the Kyuubi inside of him. He did not, however, know what his actual skill level was, so he was not going to let him get involved in this fight. He gave Naruto a look that was usually used by Anbu to silently communicate orders saying protect the others, not even slightly surprised when Naruto nodded and moved to stand near the other 3. Kakashi looked back to Zabuza, trusting Naruto keep the others safe, and lifted up his hit I-8 to reveal his Sharingan. Wow, I'm honored, using the Sharingan right away. Zabuza said with excitement. Naruto could tell that the man was smiling under the bandages covering the lower portion of his face. He felt Sasuke jerk beside him in surprise. So the Uchiha had never heard of Kakashi before. He doesn't even bother to learn who the strongest shinobi in the village are. Naruto thought to himself, stopping the eye roll that threatened to break his blank stare. He felt the moment Kakashi and Zabuza released their killing intent, ready to fight. Zabuza's killing intent was laced with madness that made a shiver of anticipation run down Naruto's spine and a malicious smirk form. This had been what he was waiting for. A real fight to the death fight. Let's see what you've got, sensei. Naruto thought to himself, elated. He felt Sasuke shaking next to him, realizing it was probably the first time the Uchiha had felt such strong killing intent before. Naruto shifted just enough to bump into him. When the Uchiha turned a questioning look to Naruto, he raised his eyebrow at him. It seemed to work because the Uchiha stopped shaking and put a serious look of concentration back on his face, getting into a defensive stance. Zabuza used Shunshin no Jutsu from the tree to on top of the water near to them, holding a ram seal with one hand across his chest and one in the air. Naruto heard him say Kurigakure no Jutsu before the entire area was covered in mist. Naruto closed his eyes, knowing they were useless in the mist. He had strengthened and honed all of his senses so that if one or more were incapacitated, he could cover the loss with another. It was something he had learned from hunting in the Forest of Death. His nose was also useless, as the mist had a certain smell of moisture that covered everything else, but he was able to hear his teammates shift and sense where everyone was. Don't worry. He heard Kakashi tell them, he'll come after me first. He's a master of silent killing. I'm aware, thanks. Naruto thought sarcastically, this time actually rolling his eyes, since nobody could see him. He heard Zabuza's voice, naming off the killing points on the body, trying to decide which to go for, while mocking them. I would have to say the spine is a person favorite. Lots of pain, but blocks movement and doesn't always kill outright. Naruto answered to himself reverently. Smashing the brain. You humans have such a pathetically small one, but it looks so nice when it explodes. The Kyuubi supplied back. But that's no fun. You can't mess around with them after if you do that. Good point. Kidneys then. They're actually pretty delicious, you know. Gross. Eat the liver, not the kidney. Naruto felt Zabuza approach, and before he could come between his teammates and their charge, he knocked everyone away, taking out his dual blades from the seal and crossing them to block Zabuza's sword from going downward. He kicked out with his foot, creating the chakra spike on the bottom, and pushed it into Zabuza, who dispelled into water. He felt a clone of Kakashi appeared behind him, just as a clone of Zabuza appeared behind that clone, slashing through it. He turned to see Kakashi holding a kunai to the neck of the Zabuza clone, telling him not to move. This is getting really irritating. There are so many better ways to fight than clone on clone on clone. Naruto thought to himself. He didn't move when he saw another Zabuza move behind Kakashi and dispel the clone that Kakashi was holding. It seemed like that was all posturing, and that was not what Naruto thought a fight between such strong shinobi would look like. Naruto watched as the fight was taken to the top of the water near them and Kakashi was trapped in a ball of water. Naruto was having a hard time holding back his annoyance at the whole fight. He hadn't seen anything good. This is a waste of time. Naruto thought angrily before deciding he had enough. He didn't think either of them were being serious and it was time for them to start. While everyone was focused on Zabuza and Kakashi, Naruto made a clone, which he transformed into Kakashi, to make it seem like Kakashi had done it and hid him in his shadow. He had his clone move to a shadow on the other side of where they were all facing off and send a barrage of kunai at Zabuza, which made him let go of Kakashi in order to dodge. It looked as though Zabuza figured that it was him though, because he looked straight at Naruto, focusing his killing intent all on him. Naruto didn't show any discomfort at having such a strong killing intent focused on him though and just stood, same bored expression on his face, with his arms crossed. Before Zabuza could make a move, Kakashi grabbed his arm, redirecting his attention back onto him. Zabuza jerked his arm free before he began making multiple rapid motion hand seals, which Kakashi copied, seal for seal, to create identical water dragons. They were going through them so fast that Naruto was having a hard time keeping up. He was able to copy them so quickly. And even match the amount of chakra that went in so that they cancelled each other out. Naruto was finally getting to see the fight that he was waiting for. He saw Kakashi playing Zabuza by matching every movement he made. That Sharingan sure is interesting. Naruto thought with a frown. He could tell that Kakashi was able to see Zabuza's movements the split second that he made them, which must have been the Sharingan's doing. Kakashi was incredible at reading people. He could tell what Zabuza was thinking by watching his reactions and saying out loud what he knew Zabuza was thinking after hearing how he had talked previously. Naruto could read Zabuza just as well, so he knew that Kakashi was not actually reading his mind as he was bluffing that he could. He saw Kakashi use Zabuza's disorientation to put him under a small genjutsu in order to further panic him while he completed a water jutsu that blew him in the air and trapping him against a tree with his kunai. "It's over," Kakashi told him. That it is, Naruto thought, finally satisfied, before feeling the shift from the second chakra signature that had been hiding throughout the fight and seeing the senbon needles go flying into Zabuza's neck. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Whoever Zabuza's ally was, they were very skilled. It was absurdly hard to hit just those correct points in the human neck for the desired effect of death without actually causing it. "True, indeed," said the voice of Zabuza's companion. Naruto glanced up to see a young man wearing the mask of a hunter nin from Kurigakure on a branch of the same tree above Kakashi. Kakashi jumped down to check Zabuza's pulse. Naruto knew he wouldn't feel anything, but that Zabuza would probably wake back up in about 30 minutes. Naruto saw Kakashi narrow his eyes after feeling for the pulse. As Kakashi moved away from Zabuza, his young companion used Shunshin to land next to the body, picking it up. "Thanks for your help. I will be disposing of the body now. Farewell," he said, using Shunshin to leave. "Well, time to get Tazuna home," Kakashi said, covering back up his Sharingan before passing out. Naruto rolled his eyes. So there was one downside to using the Sharingan. Chakra exhaustion. He was sure that the more mastered one was over the Sharingan, the less chakra it depleted. That would be correct. He heard the Kikbi growl in reply. Naruto waited to see if the Kikbi would go into detail, but that was all the information he offered. Naruto just mentally shrugged before putting one of Kakashi's arms around his shoulders and carrying him the rest of the way to Tazuna's house, which was a quiet trip. After coming to the conclusion that Zabuza must still be alive later that night, Kakashi told them they should train so they would be ready for when he comes back. Kakashi met his eyes which told Naruto they train. "Well, you tell me what's going on." Naruto inwardly flinched. He had done well avoiding this talk, but it seemed like he couldn't anymore. While Kakashi was teaching Sasuke, Sakura, and a clone Naruto had created to make it seem like he was learning with them about chakra control, Naruto was waiting a good distance off for Kakashi to return so that they could have their talk. It wasn't long before Naruto could hear the sound of Kakashi approaching. Naruto stayed where he was, leaning against a tree with his arms crossed. Kakashi sat with his back against the tree opposite Naruto. "So, how about you tell me what's going on?" Kakashi asked calmly, closing his eyes with a smile that was more unsettling than reassuring. Naruto sighed. Here we go, he thought. I take it you read up on our files before taking us as a team, but did you notice anything about me the first day you met me? Naruto asked. Kakashi frowned. I did notice something seemed off about you, but I didn't wonder too much about it. Kakashi replied honestly. You thought it was the kickbee that made me seem off. Naruto stated more than questioned. The only sign that showed Kakashi's surprise was the slight widening of his visible eye. The traitor, Mizuki, told me about it when he had me steal the scroll. Ah. It was the first time I had actually observed you, so yes, I thought it was the kickbee. Kakashi replied. Now Naruto knew that Kakashi was not able to tell that he had first met a clone. He appreciated Kakashi being straight with him, but he could not offer the same back. All he could give half-truths to make his story sound more plausible. Remember when I said that I was going to become the Hokage? Naruto didn't know for sure if his clone had told this to Kakashi per se, but he knew his clone was spouting it off to anyone who would listen, so he figured Kakashi was one of the people he had made that promise to. Kakashi just nodded his head in affirmation. Well, it's hard to become a Hokage when everyone despises you, you know. Naruto said, as if he was just stating some random fact, not something as personal as it was. Naruto noticed Kakashi flinch. I didn't know why the villagers acted the way they did at the time, but I knew that they didn't like me. It seemed like they disliked me even more when I showed that I had intelligence of any kind. Kakashi's eye widened in understanding. You acted that way to make the villagers believe that you weren't a threat. Kakashi stated in awe. Naruto nodded. The plan was for me to continue to act that way until I made Genin. That was where I would start showing, little by little, what I was actually capable of. But I didn't see the point in continuing to hide my intelligence after graduating, so I stopped that once I knew I was on a team. As a shinobi, the village puts its trust in you to protect the village. It was once I was an actual shinobi that I could start proving myself to the village. I wanted them to acknowledge me, but I couldn't start doing that until I showed the village that I was willing to risk my life for their sake. Naruto was hiding his discomfort at having to talk so much. He knew how well Kakashi could read people, so he was doing his best to tell him mostly the truth. He was just lucky that Kakashi didn't know him during his time in the academy. He was sure he wouldn't get away with such a story if that was the case. Kakashi was nodding his head sympathetically. That makes sense. You would act the way you did in public, but in private you would be training and getting stronger in preparation for when you graduated. So? How strong are you? Kakashi asked in curiosity, once again smiling. Naruto just shrugged. The clone Naruto created didn't feel like learning how to walk up trees with chakra when he already knew how, so he just sat at the base of his tree, eyes closed with his hands behind his head, relaxing. He could sense the steady hum of chakra Sakura was controlling through her feet, which told him that she already knew how to do it and had excellent chakra control. He could hear Sasuke struggling with keeping a constant flow through his feet, however. After a while, he could feel their glares on him. How do you expect to get any better if you can't control your chakra, Naruto? Sakura asked him after she felt she had the process down. Naruto ignored her, feigning sleep. He probably just doesn't want to embarrass himself with his lack of control. He probably couldn't even go a step without falling. The Uchiha said smugly. Naruto's eyebrow twitched, but he ignored the jibe. Sasuke was the one without control, not him. Naruto felt Sakura sit next to him. Hey Naruto. What happened? Why are you so different from how you were in the academy? Sakura asked him straightforwardly. Naruto opened his eyes and looked at each of them in turn. Sakura was shifting uncomfortably, in obvious hesitation. Sasuke had a deep frown on his face, arms crossed. It seems they had both been thinking about him, which was odd, in his opinion. His clone must have been worse than he had thought. He was not used to people wondering about him, unless it was about him being a threat, but it didn't seem like that was what was bothering them. Naruto sighed. He put his arms down and sat up, looking at them seriously. Sasuke came to sit with him and Sakura. Look, I don't know if you guys have realized it or not, but I'm not really all that popular in the village. Naruto started. It's because of your pranks. Sakura stated plainly. If you think that, you aren't as smart as you seem. Naruto replied in annoyance. He needed to calm down. Even if he objected heavily to it, this was his team for the time being, and in order for him to advance he needed to get past this stage, and the only way to do that was work with this team until he got promoted. Excuse me? Sakura asked angrily, eyes narrowed. Sasuke's eyes were also narrowed at him. Sorry, I didn't mean that. Naruto apologized, but it was obvious he wasn't serious in his apology. From as far back as I can remember, even before I started doing those pranks, the villagers didn't like me. They seemed to think I was some sort of troublemaker. So, since they saw me that way, I decided to just go with it. Sakura and Sasuke's eyes widened in surprise. Do you know why they treated you that way? Sasuke asked. As far as I can tell, it had something to do with my birth, but that's as much as I know. Naruto replied. They could not read him like Kakashi could, so he could lie all he wanted, but he figured coming as close to the truth without actually saying it was the best option. So, that was all just fake then. How you acted when we were in the academy? All of it? Sakura asked in surprise. Naruto just nodded his head. So what, this is the real you? Sasuke asked. Naruto nodded his head again. But why stop acting like that now? Well, I'm an adult now, aren't I? I'm a shinobi of the leaf, and now that I'm a genin, I can start proving myself to the village so that they can acknowledge me for who I truly am, not for what they see me as. He was startled to see admiration flash in both of their eyes, as well as understanding in Sasuke's. Besides, Naruto continued, don't I make a better teammate now than if I acted the same as I did during the academy? Definitely. Sasuke and Sakura replied in unison with smiles on their face. That doesn't excuse you from training. Sakura added seriously. Naruto looked from her to Sasuke, who had a look of agreement on his face, before shrugging his shoulders and flipping backwards onto the tree using his hands, landing feet first. He then slowly walked his way up the tree and flipped off, landing on his feet once reaching the tallest branch. Both Sakura and Sasuke looked at him in amazement. How long have you known how to do that? Sasuke asked angrily. Naruto just shrugged his shoulders in response. Want me to teach you? He asked Sasuke seriously. Sasuke stared at him for a moment, thinking it over, before nodding his head. The rest of the day Naruto taught Sasuke how to control his chakra enough to climb up the tree. Though Sasuke wouldn't admit it, Naruto was a great teacher. He was patient and explained things in simple ways that made learning how to do it easy. By the end of that night, Sasuke had made it all the way up the tree. It was while he was at the top of the tree, looking down at Naruto, who was giving him a nod of approval, that he decided that perhaps Naruto wasn't so bad after all. Chapter 5. A few days after Naruto had taught Sasuke how to walk up trees, he decided he wanted some alone time. He had just heard the story about Tezuna's grandson, Inari, and his father from Tezuna, and he wanted to be on his own to contemplate it. Since Naruto never had a father, or someone who he looked up to as Inari did, he couldn't understand why the child was so affected by the man's death. People die. That's life. The man didn't sound so much like a hero to Naruto anyway. So the guy helped close a gate to block off a flood by jumping into the raging water, and he objected to a corrupt man trying to run their country. Big deal. That just meant that he was a man, doing his duty. That didn't make him a hero. What was a hero anyways? Someone who gave up their life for strangers. An idiot. The Kikbi supplied. That may be right. Naruto said back with a frown. All of the heroes Naruto had heard about were dead, except for the Sandaime, but Naruto had never seen him do anything heroic, he had just heard that he was remarkably powerful. All of a sudden, Naruto felt the chakra signature of Zabuza's ally coming his way. Naruto lowered his chakra signature and leaned back against a tree, waiting quietly in sight. He got a good look at the effeminate male once he came into view. He was definitely around his own age. He actually looked nice, surprisingly, and he didn't have any malicious aura about him, as Zabuza did. When the boy caught sight of Naruto, he got in a defensive stance, pulling out some senbons. Naruto put his hands up, showing his intent not to fight. A look of contemplation came across his face. Hey, can I ask you something? Naruto asked in curiosity. What? The boy answered cautiously. You're close to Zabuza, aren't you? I mean, you would go so far as to put yourself in danger just to rescue him, so you must be, right? Yes. The boy answered, with a curious look on his face. How would you feel if he died? Naruto asked. The boy's face contorted in anger, and he got back into a defensive stance. I would kill whoever did it. He answered with true malice. Naruto was surprised. The boy seemed so mild-mannered, but that seemed to set him off. No, I mean how would you feel? I've never been that close to anyone, but I know someone who was. A person that was important to them was killed, and apparently the kid completely changed after. I just don't understand why. Naruto said with brows furrowed. The boy looked at Naruto blankly for a second before putting his senbon away and taking a seat near him, feeling no threat. I once didn't have anyone. I was alone. Then Zabuza-san found me. He took me in when nobody else would. He fed me and gave me a purpose. The boy told Naruto. Naruto frowned. You didn't have a purpose before? He asked. The boy gave a small, sad smile. No. I had nothing before Zabuza-san. He is everything to me. He is my purpose for living. Without him, I would go back to having nothing. Why? I understand Zabuza helped you out, but don't you think living for someone isn't living at all? Shouldn't you be living for yourself? Naruto asked, still confused. The boy gave a soft laugh. Think about it this way. Imagine if you were alone. No home, no family, no friends. No way to make money or take care of yourself. You think, perhaps I should die. There is nothing for me, no reason to live. Then all of a sudden, someone comes around and gives everything that you could ever want or need. How would you feel? The boy asked, looking carefully at Naruto's face. Naruto did think about it hard. He thought about what life might have been like for him if he didn't have the Hokage looking out for him. A look of realization came across his face. I would feel that I owed my life to that person, and I would try to return the kindness they have shown me. Naruto began looking at the Sandaime in a new light. He had never really thought about it, but the Sandaime really had helped him out more than he realized. He would have grown up on the streets, with no money for food or a place to live without his help. Every day would have been a struggle for survival. Instead, the Hokage gave him a place to live, money for necessities, and taught him what he needed to know in order to get stronger. Exactly. The boy said, giving Naruto the same small smile. I still wouldn't think that I had nothing if that person died though. Naruto continued with a look of deep thought upon his face. I would live for the both of us because that person gave me a reason to live, so I shouldn't waste what they gave me by giving up. The boy looked shocked at Naruto's response. It seemed that he had never thought about that before. He gave Naruto a genuine smile. It was so warm that Naruto felt slightly uncomfortable. Nobody had given him such a smile before. You're right. The boy said. Hey, what's your name? Naruto asked him. The boy looked surprised. Haku. He replied. Alright, Haku. I'm Naruto and for your help, I'm going to give you mine. It's only fair. I'm pretty good with medical ninjutsu, so I'll help heal Zabuza for you. Haku gave Naruto a shocked and suspicious look. Why would you do that? He's your enemy. No. He may be Kakashi's enemy, but he is not mine. In fact, there is something I want to ask him as well. If you don't trust me, you can keep a senbon to a vital point while I do it, and any sign that I might not be truthful, you can kill me. Hey. You can't decide things like that without discussing them with me first. He heard the Kikbi bellow at him. It'll be fine. Naruto replied. Haku stared at him for a few minutes before nodding. He didn't know why, but he felt an intense feeling of calm and trust around this Konoha shinobi. Naruto gave a small nod of his own to Haku. Great. When would you like to start? He asked Haku. Now, if you have the time. But I warn you, I will have to blindfold you on the way there and back. You understand, right? Haku asked him seriously. Of course. Naruto replied calmly. Haku didn't completely trust him, which was smart. If Naruto knew the way to their base, he could just bring his teammates there later if he decided to change his mind. Haku took off the obi around his waist and tied it securely around Naruto's eyes. Here we go. Naruto heard him say before he felt Haku shunshin them. He was still blindfolded as Haku continued to walk him into the building where Zabuza was. After walking for a bit, Haku stopped and took off the blindfold. They were standing in front of a door. Zabuza-san is right inside. I'm not sure how he will respond to seeing you, so please be careful. Haku warned. Naruto nodded in response. The second Haku opened the door, Zabuza's killing intent started spilling out. Naruto couldn't help it, he briefly smirked. It wasn't every day that you met someone with as malicious a killing intent as yourself. A job, Haku, you brought me the brat to kill. Zabuza said, glaring at Naruto. Naruto just stared back blankly. Nope. I'm here to heal you and to ask some questions. Naruto responded. Zabuza froze. He looked to Haku in confusion, getting a nod of confirmation. I don't understand. He said, confused. Well, let's just say, you sparked my interest. It's not every day that you meet someone that's similar to you. Naruto replied, still with no emotion in his voice. Zabuza narrowed his eyes and then laughed. Kid, you are nothing like me. What are you, a genin straight out of the academy? So you've got some skill and maybe you surprised me. But you have no idea what you are dealing with. Naruto narrowed his eyes as well. He might have been right about the genin comment but not the rest. Naruto then smirked before letting loose all of the killing intent he had been holding back. It was a mixture of his and the Kikbi's, and the Kikbi, even helped by added more of his own, enough so that Naruto's eyes turned red, pupils becoming slits, his whisker marks became darker, his nails longer and sharper, and his body radiated savagery. You are not the only demon in the world. Naruto growled, his voice low and gravely from the power radiating off of him. Zabuza had never felt fear before, but he swore then that the feeling shooting up his spine must have been that. Even Haku seemed to be frozen in place, staring. Just as quickly as the power came, it was gone, leaving a blank-faced Naruto standing there once again, looking at them calmly. So, shall I heal you now while I ask my questions? Naruto asked. Zabuza and Haku seemed to visibly jerk before looking at each other. Alright. Shoot. Zabuza said hesitantly. Naruto approached him and took the seat that was on his left before starting to use his medical ninjutsu on him. He noticed that Haku stayed on the other side of the bed, just watching. Why do you work for someone as weak, Gatm? I would figure someone like you would rather slice someone like him in half than work for him. Is it because you need money? Naruto asked, while concentrating his chakra carefully. He didn't look up, but he could feel Haku and Zabuza exchange another look. If you must know, we are using him for his money. Haku answered. Okay. And what do you need the money for? That is our own business. Zabuza gruffly answered. Fair enough. What if I can help you with that? Naruto asked them. They looked at him in shock. What do you mean? Haku asked. Well, I am in need of some eyes and ears, you see. And you guys seem like you could be some of the best out there. I am, unfortunately, not able to go out and gather my own information about what is happening in the other countries, and you are actually the first shinobi outside of my village that I have met, beside the two that attacked us earlier, but no offense, those guys really aren't up to par. Naruto told them, finishing up on Zabuza. He was definitely getting better with the medical ninjutsu. I would, of course, pay you quite well for your services. I can even give you the locations to some abandoned hideouts that you guys can use. That's it. You just want us to tell you any information that we come across. And you just give us money and places to stay. Zabuza asked in amazement. This was the easiest deal he had ever made. Yup. Naruto replied, sitting back in the chair, crossing his arms and looking at them. Deal. Zabuza said without hesitation. Haku shot his eyes to Zabuza in surprise, before looking at Naruto and giving him another one of his smiles. Thanks. If I pay you in advance, would you mind killing Gatma a little ahead of schedule? He's kind of a pain in my ass right now. Zabuza gave a look of sadistic glee. It would be my pleasure. Naruto nodded and handed Zabuza a bag full of money. He looked shocked at how much money was in there. Luckily, since Naruto had never spent the money given to him, he had a lot saved up. Less than he would like, considering his clone had been obsessed with ramen apparently, but more than enough for this deal. A major pain in my ass. Naruto said, smirking evilly back. Zabuza was starting to like this kid. Here's all the hideouts that are empty that you can use. Naruto told them, pulling out a map and marking off a couple of places. And this is so that I can find you to give you payment, and if you need to contact me, you just push some chakra into it and I'll be there. Naruto pulled out a sealed tag and gave it to Haku. A scroll Naruto found in the Hokage's home that had his name on it described how to do some of his dad's most famous jutsu. It also gave evidence that his dad was indeed Namikaze Minato, since he was the one that wrote it. It looked as if it was written just before Naruto's birth in case of his death. Naruto now knew how to do the Hiraishin no Jutsu that his dad was so famous for. Naruto was just working out the kinks on it now for his own specific use. Traveling to wherever Zabuza and Haku were at the time would be the longest he had traveled using it though, so he hoped it would work. There was also a jutsu called the Rasengan that he was going to start learning once he got back home. How did you find out about all of these hideouts if you were never able to leave Konohagure before? Haku asked him. I had a contact that told me about them. Don't worry, he's a solid source. Naruto didn't tell them that he hadn't heard from this contact in a few years, but he knew that the information would still be current. They both just nodded at him. I should probably head back before my team starts looking for me. Naruto told them, getting up. Oh, and it was a pleasure meeting the two of you. Naruto told them with a bow before disappearing. How the hell? Zabuza asked in confusion. Haku just shrugged his shoulders. They both agreed. Naruto was an odd one, but he was also very fascinating. They were looking forward to their new arrangement. Naruto made it back to Tezuna's residence just in time for dinner. Inari started yelling at Naruto, telling him he should stop being a hero because heroes die, and then started crying. Naruto didn't know why he was yelling at him specifically, but he was becoming a nuisance. Hey kid, I'm no hero. Naruto said, staring at the kid seriously. He was bluffing really well right now, but doing the medical jutsu, followed by the Hiraishin back to where he placed a seal for it in his backpack, had really worn him down. It was the furthest distance he had gone so far, and it made him slightly nauseous, so he was a little cranky. I'm just doing my job. Everybody has a job, a duty, a reason for living. Your grandpa is building this bridge. Your dad was doing whatever he felt was right. Your mom is taking care of you. Maybe one day you'll grow up and get one yourself. Naruto said, giving the kid a glare before leaving the table. Naruto. Sakura yelled after him in shock and anger. Inari stared down at the table dumbfounded before running off to his room, still crying. Naruto was so exhausted from the day before that he was still asleep when the rest of his team and Tezuna were ready to go to the bridge the next morning. They decided to leave him since something seemed to be bothering him, judging from his attitude the night before, and they didn't feel like getting in the middle of it. They figured he would just catch up when he awoke. An hour later, Naruto woke with a jerk, feeling two malicious auras entering the house. He didn't feel any chakra, so they had to be some other sort of assassin. Naruto got up and dressed quickly before melting into the shadows to see who was coming. Samurai? Naruto asked Akikbi, looking at the two men who were standing over Inari's mom in the kitchen. Looks like it. The Kikbi confirmed. Naruto could tell that Inari was standing just outside of the kitchen where the two men and his mother were. Naruto wanted to see if Inari would man up and protect his mom or if he would let her be taken away. He figured that if the kid let his own mother be taken, then he was worthless and beyond help. But if the kid stepped up, Naruto would help out. Just as the samurai were about to leave with Inari's mom, Inari finally came out of hiding, yelling at them. "Stop. You can't have her. You'll have to go through me first." Inari charged at them with all the courage he could muster. Before Inari reached the samurai, who had their swords out ready to strike the kid, Naruto jumped out of his shadow and knocked them out, hitting them with the butt of his blades against their temples. He would have killed them, but the kid didn't need to see that. He was just a regular kid, not a shinobi, so his life shouldn't involve death and violence. After he tied them up, he turned to the brat. "Good job, kid. You were able to protect her until I could get here," Naruto told him. "Do you think you can keep taking care of her while I find your gramps?" "Of course. I'll do a good job and make you proud." Inari yelled after Naruto as he was leaping away in the trees. "Make yourself proud," Naruto called back in response. He hoped that he didn't miss any action on the bridge and he wasn't disappointed. It looked like Gatman and his army had just arrived. Naruto could sense Zabuza and Haku hiding just off the bridge near Gatman's army. He was waiting to see if they would hold up their end of the bargain. He really didn't want to kill them. He would, of course, if it came down to it, but he kind of liked the pair. It sounded like Gat was yelling something about giving up building the bridge or die. He also mentioned the assassin sent to kill his daughter and grandchild. "Oh, sorry. I took care of those two guys. You should really look into hiring better assassins." Naruto told Gatmas his way of entrance, jumping to Tazuna and his team's side. "Zabuza. Kill them," Gatma ordered angrily. Zabuza and Haku, who was no longer wearing his mask, appeared on the bridge next to Gatma. That was the hunter Nin. "But, he's so young," he heard Sakura say. "You know, I think I would rather kill you," Zabuza said before slicing Gatma in half. Naruto heard Sakura gasp next to him. "Maybe not. Better assassins don't seem to want to listen to you," Naruto said to the corpse of Gatma as the two pieces of him fell to the ground. Before any of Gatma's army could attack Zabuza and Haku in revenge, they used Shunshin to appear on either side of Naruto. Kakashi hadn't been expecting it and was caught off guard. "Our job is done here. The rest is up to you. See you around, kid," Zabuza said, looking at Naruto. Naruto nodded to him then at Haku, who gave him a smile before they disappeared. "Naruto? What just happened?" Kakashi asked in utter confusion. "Oh, I just convinced them that working for Gat was a bad idea, that's all," Naruto said with a shrug. "When?" "Yesterday," Naruto replied nonchalantly. Tazuna and his team couldn't believe that Naruto had actually convinced Zabuza to leave and without fighting Kakashi again. "I think we have something a bit more important to worry about," Naruto told them, shifting his eyes to the now jobless and very enraged army. "Right," Kakashi said. "This is going to be slightly difficult. Not to worry. We're here to help." The group looked to find Inari leading all of the villagers who looked ready to fight. Gatm's group didn't look so bloodthirsty now that they were actually up against another army. They were actually looking quite unsure. Naruto looked between the two groups with a frown. Gatm's army looked only slightly trained, but they had some nasty looking weapons. The group Inari was leading was all the untrained villagers, some with only sticks. If they were to fight, there would be lots of casualties. It would be a damned massacre, even with the help of Team 7. If he really wanted to be anyone with power, he needed to be good at politics, which was about utilizing the power of minds and words. He needed this fight to end without bloodshed, which meant he needed to make some sort of impressive speech. He just hoped that it would work. "Why continue to fight when you have no reason to?" Naruto's voice while addressing the letterless army carried to everyone on the bridge. "The man who hired you is dead. You will get no more work or money from him, and if you fight these villagers, there will continue to be no money for your country. If you want jobs and to make this country better for you and your families, you should help build this bridge with your neighbors. You will once more have a purpose, a job, and be a part of history. You will all be known for helping make this country a better place, instead of being known for trying to destroy its future." Even to Naruto's ears it sounded like the lamest thing he had ever said, but he needed to establish himself here. If this worked, he would be one step closer to renown. "I think I'm going to throw up," the Kikbi said. It actually sounded like he was gagging a little. "Oh, shut up," Naruto responded in humiliation. Chapter 6. Team 7 was finally to leave Nami no Kuni and make their way home. Naruto was still amazed that the ridiculous speech had worked. He figured that Gatma's army was just made up of uneducated idiots, used to listening to people that sounded smarter than them, and that's why they listened to him. They had even agreed to help finish the bridge. "Oh look, the hero is here," Kakashi said when Naruto stepped out of Tazuna's house, ready to leave. "Good morning, Mr. Hero," Please make sure all the bad guys leave us alone on our way home." Kakashi called to him. Sasuke and Sakura started snickering. "Fuck off." Naruto growled back, walking past them towards where the boat was waiting to take them back. He heard them snicker louder behind him. "You know, they have a point. Think of the amazing fight you would have been in if you had just kept your mouth shut and let things happen." The Kyuubi commented. He was right, of course. All Naruto did on this mission was talk, if you don't count blocking Zabuza's sword once or stabbing those so-called shinobi twins with his chakra. And it was his first ever A-rank mission and his first time out of High no Kuni. Naruto held back a sigh at the missed chance for a good fight, but it was better this way. He was still able to keep his skills hidden, and it looked like Kakashi wasn't paying as much attention to him anymore. Not only that, but he now had 2 spies working for him. Who knew that words could be so useful? Once Team 7 had reached the boat, they saw Izuna standing there, waiting for them. He gave them all a big smile and thanked them profusely for all of their help. He gave Naruto extra thanks. "So, do you know what you are going to name the bridge yet?" Sakura called back to him as the boat started moving away. "The Great Naruto Bridge." Tizuna yelled back with a smile. Team 7's eyes shot to Naruto, and he saw their mouths start to open. "Don't." Naruto snapped at them and the Kyuubi, who had started to say something as well, angrily. They began snickering again, but didn't say anything else the entire way home. Once they got back to Konoha, he immediately took off to his apartment before they could even think about saying anything else to him. They could give the damn mission report on their own. He was done being around people for a while. The next morning, he sensed Sasuke outside of his apartment. The Uchiha had been pacing in front of his door for a couple of minutes, seemingly contemplating whether or not to knock. Team 7 should have the day off, considering their mission had been a higher ranked one. Naruto sighed and got dressed, hiding all of his scrolls and books in the seal on his arm before walking to the front door and opening it. He saw Sasuke in the doorway, his hand flying behind his back as if he wasn't about to knock. Naruto raised an eyebrow at him in question. Sasuke furrowed his brows and cleared his throat nervously before speaking. "I was wondering if you would like to spar." Sasuke said haltingly, as if confused as to why he was asking. Naruto was about to shoot him down, since he knew the Uchiha was below him in skill, and it would just be a waste of his personal training time to agree, but he stopped before answering. He didn't actually know how much skill the Uchiha had, and learning how to fight someone with a Sharingan would definitely be beneficial. He could also feel the potential the Uchiha had. It would be nice to have a sparring partner that was near his level once the Uchiha gained more skill. He could just send his clones to train while he was with the Uchiha anyways. Sure, why not? Naruto instead responded with a shrug. Sasuke looked at him in surprise, as if he was expecting Naruto to refuse. He then nodded and moved out of the doorway for Naruto to exit. After locking the door, he followed Sasuke to Team 7's usual training ground. "Was there anything in particular that you wanted to work on?" Naruto asked Sasuke once they reached their destination. "Everything. I need to get better at everything." Sasuke replied bitterly with a frown. Naruto was surprised. The Uchiha was really serious about getting strong and knew that he was lacking. "Why?" Naruto asked, actually curious. "I am nowhere near close enough to kill that man." Sasuke replied with malice in his voice. "Which man?" Naruto was confused. "Uchiha Itachi." Sasuke said the name with so much venom that Naruto could almost see the hatred coming off of him. Naruto was even more confused. "Why Uchiha Itachi? Didn't Sasuke know the truth about his clan? Because he killed your family? Because he massacred my family?" Sasuke yelled. Naruto had never seen the Uchiha show so much emotion before, but he didn't miss the spark of madness forming behind his eyes. "Do you know why he did it?" Naruto asked, keeping his voice as calm as possible in order to not set off the Uchiha. "Because he's insane." Sasuke was still yelling angrily. "Do you really think that's the case? You grew up with him, didn't you? You're his brother, so you knew him better than anyone. Think back. Did he really seem insane to you?" Naruto knew that Itachi had been forced to kill his clan, but he wasn't about to tell the truth to Sasuke. He doubted the Uchiha would even listen to him. He needed to find out the truth for himself. That comment actually gave Sasuke pause and the anger lessened to be replaced with confusion. Sasuke stuttered, not really sure what to think. "Think back to before what happened. What was your brother like? What was his reputation? How did he seem?" Naruto asked calmly. "He was always so nice to me. He was always so busy doing missions, but he always made time to spend with me." Sasuke replied quietly, a far-off look in his eyes. "Everyone called him a prodigy. They said he was one of the best shinobi in Konoha. And the rest of your family? What were they like? Did you notice anything strange about them?" Naruto asked. Sasuke's eyes shot back to Naruto, with a sharp look in them. When he saw Naruto's blank face and calm demeanor, his anger dissipated and a thoughtful look came over his face. "My mother was very kind and loving, but the rest of the family was very secretive and focused on power. They would have a lot of meetings that I was not allowed to attend. My father was usually pretty cold to me, but he was really focused on Itachi. At some point, he and Itachi had some sort of falling out and they stopped talking. Then my father started giving me attention, telling me not to be like Itachi. Sasuke then remembered a time when he had overheard an argument between Itachi and his father, where his father accused Itachi of being more dedicated to Konoha than the Uchihas, as if they were separate. Naruto could see the myriad of emotions and thoughts on Sasuke's face, ending again with confusion. I don't understand. Sasuke finally said. I don't know what to believe anymore. Well, Itachi obviously left you alive for some reason. How about instead of trying to kill your brother, you have him tell you the truth? Naruto suggested. That's what he would want if he was in the Uchiha's position. He saw Sasuke frown, then nod, looking back up at Naruto with a look of determination. You're right. I've been so focused on getting revenge that I didn't even stop to think why Itachi did it. But I do want to know. Right? And in order to do that, you need to get stronger so that you can face your brother. Naruto finished for him. Sasuke nodded, feeling a bit odd. For so many years, he had been harboring this hate and vengeance within him that it felt strange for it to be gone. Naruto knew about the madness that threatened all the Uchiha, so he knew that even if it had currently left Sasuke, that didn't mean it couldn't return in some other form. Look at you, talking again instead of fighting. If I didn't know you were actually strong, I would say that you use words to hide your lack of skill. The Kikbi mocked. He was, in truth, amazed at Jinchuriki's ability to control people by just speaking to them. It didn't look like the kid realized it, but that was a rare and incredibly powerful ability. Naruto ignored the Kikbi and focused on Sasuke. The Uchiha was looking anywhere but at him and looked exhausted. He supposed that it was a lot for the Uchiha to take in, believing something for years, then finding out that it may not be true. It didn't look like he was up for that spar he had wanted before. How about we get something to eat? Naruto didn't know why he asked, but he had a feeling that the Uchiha didn't want to talk anymore, yet didn't want to be alone either. Sasuke just nodded his head. Naruto remembered seeing packets of dango in Sasuke's bag on their way to Mizuno Kuni, so he led Sasuke to a dango stand, figuring he must like them. Once they had taken a seat at the bar, he had Sasuke order whatever he wanted. Naruto refrained from getting anything himself, noticing the glares he was getting from the people behind the counter and not wanting to have food that they would undoubtedly mess with. After their order had been taken, Sasuke turned to Naruto in confusion. Why didn't you get anything? He asked. I ate already. Naruto replied with a shrug. Sasuke frowned and looked around the shop. He noticed the glares people were sending Naruto's way, some people even getting up and leaving. He even noticed the shop owner glaring at Naruto after placing Sasuke's order in front of him. So this is what you meant earlier? Sasuke asked him, referring to when Naruto's clone had told them about the villagers not liking him. Naruto just tilted his head in agreement. Did you not order anything because they would do something to your food? Does this always happen? Naruto didn't respond, instead just placing his elbow on the counter and resting his head on his hand, looking at the ceiling. Sasuke was starting to get angry. Naruto said it had something to do with his birth, so it wasn't anything he could have stopped or anything he did personally. Sasuke opened his mouth, ready to berate the people in the shop, when he was interrupted. Naruto, Sasuke, what are you two doing here? Sasuke turned around and Naruto shifted his eyes slightly to see the three people who entered the shop behind them. Naruto saw that the three were around the same age as him and wearing Hitai. The one that called to them was a male with medium-length brown hair tied up into a high ponytail. HN. Sasuke replied, annoyed at getting interrupted. Naruto didn't reply since it was obvious what they were doing there, so it had to be a rhetorical question. I'm amazed to see you two together without there being a fight. Are you two trying to get along now that you're on the same team? The same male asked, taking a seat next to Naruto. The female in the group took a seat next to Sasuke and started flipping her long blonde hair that was also tied up in a high ponytail over her shoulder in what Naruto figured to be a flirtatious manner toward Sasuke while shooting a glare at Naruto. Naruto saw Sasuke frown in annoyance at his still untouched food in front of him. The other large brown-haired male of the group took the seat on the other side of the ponytailed male. Naruto figured that perhaps they were friends of his clone since they seemed comfortable with him, except for the blonde. I think we get along pretty well. Naruto told them with a shrug. The three stared at him in shock before looking in question at Sasuke, who just grunted in agreement. Wow, Naruto. Being a genin really made you grow up a lot, didn't it, Shika? The large male said in awe. Naruto turned to look at him, catching the look of confused contemplation on the ponytailed male's face. That it did, Chinjai. He replied, eyes narrowed. Ah, so this was the new Inoshika CHM team. Naruto had to be careful. He could see the intelligence in the Nara's eyes and the way he was looking at Naruto was making him slightly nervous. This kid was smart and probably already figured out that Naruto was acting too differently from before for it to be just from becoming a genin. Come on, Naruto. I'm not hungry anyways. Sasuke said, leaving some money on the counter and getting off his stool. Naruto followed him out. He could feel the eyes of the Nara intently on him as they left. He had a feeling he would be seeing him again very soon. After leaving the shop, Naruto followed Sasuke back to their usual training ground. It seemed that the Uchiha got the fight back into him because for the rest of the morning, into most of the evening, they began training. It had started out with sparring before Naruto had to cut it short to instruct Sasuke on how to properly do some taijutsu moves and ninjutsu, which continued until the sun began setting. They had parted with Sasuke looking exhausted but satisfied, making his way home. Naruto just sat down on the ground, with his back leaning against one of the 3 large wood logs placed vertically in the ground and waited. He only had to wait half an hour before the Nara showed up. Naruto was glad to see that he was alone. "You want to tell me what's going on?" Shikamaru asked, using the log on Naruto's right to lean against as he sat down. "Not really, but I have a feeling that if I don't, you're going to try and figure it out on your own, which might make things worse." Naruto replied. "You're not the same Naruto that was in the academy. You didn't even recognize us earlier." Shikamaru was looking annoyed. Perhaps because he couldn't figure out what was going on and the Naras don't like not knowing things. Naruto had to really think. If he didn't tell the Nara something believable, then he would probably start poking around or worse, asking questions of others, which would bring attention to him. But he couldn't use the same story he told Kakashi because apparently the Nara already knew that it wasn't really him before, so saying he was putting on an act wouldn't fly. He really wished he hadn't been in the same class as this guy. "I'm not the same, no. But it was Naruto that you knew." Naruto replied calmly. "The clone?" Shikamaru stated, without surprise. "So he had already figured that much out. He is probably just confused as to how and why I did it then." Naruto thought. There really was no other way but to tell the truth, and he really hoped that the Nara wouldn't go running and telling everyone once he did. He didn't seem the type, but you never know. The Hokage wanted me to attend the academy, but I had already started learning on my own. I thought it would be a waste of time and training if I were to go, so I created a clone to go in my stead." Naruto told him, nonchalantly. "Seems you do well learning on your own, since you could create an advanced, self-sustaining clone." Shikamaru stated, suspiciously. "Have you ever read through the books in the library? They hold an immense amount of knowledge in jutsu. Not in the civilian and academy section of the library. You would need to get into the Chunin level section for something like that." Shikamaru pushed. Naruto had to be very careful about what he said now. This was a Nara he was talking to, and the only reason he was able to access high-level information was from essentially stealing the jutsu they were known for and modifying it. "Look, I've already figured that the reason you did this and how you made the clone is something that you would get in trouble for, and I really don't care. I won't say anything because I can tell you didn't do it to endanger the village in any way. So why don't you just tell me the truth?" Mandakusai Naruto could tell the other was getting tired of his hesitation. "Fine, if he wants the truth, then I'll give him the truth." Naruto thought, getting annoyed. There was no way to get around this guy, so no more beating around the bush. "Since my dad, the Yondaime, sealed the Kikbi inside of me the day I was born before dying, the villagers act as if I am the Kikbi, and they fear and hate me. They seem to really get offensive when I show that I have any intelligence, so I have to sneak around to get any information. I learned how to do Fukinjutsu, and I used it to create a method of being able to travel in the shadows, which is how I was able to access the higher level sections of the library and why I thought it would be a waste of time going to the academy, because I already had skills and knowledge that far surpassed anything that they taught there. It was also through the use of a bunchen created from 2 nature manipulations and Fukinjutsu that I was able to create the self-sustaining clone." Shikamaru blinked slowly, a blank look on his face. "I see." He finally said, looking at the ground, frowning. "The way the villagers treat you, your birthday, your resemblance to the Yondaime, the Hokage's interest in you, it all makes sense now. You're the only one to notice." Naruto said with a snort, rolling his eyes. "Apparently." Shikamaru replied with a smirk. "You know, I was friends with that clone of yours back in the academy, but I think I like the real you better. You ever play Shingai?" "Nope, though I've read how to." Naruto responded with his own smirk. "We should play sometime. I have a feeling that you would actually be a challenge." Shikamaru told him. Naruto's smirk grew wider, and he nodded. "Then you can tell me how you were able to create that method to travel in shadows." Naruto's smirk vanished as he watched Shikamaru get up and leave the training ground. Naruto had interacted with others more than he was comfortable with this particular day, but there was still one other person he had to speak with. In fact, it was the only person he had intended to meet that day. He had initially wanted to go into the forest and train with the clones until the evening, then go visit the Hokage, but Sasuke showing up had really messed up his schedule. So Naruto begrudgingly made his way to the Hokage tower. Once Naruto was allowed into the Hokage's office by his secretary, after receiving an annoyed glare, he kneeled down in front of the Hokage in the same way he kneeled when first meeting the Kyuubi. "Hokage-sama," Naruto said in greeting while still remaining kneeled. "Naruto. Is there something you wanted?" The Sandaime asked, looking at Naruto in confusion. When Naruto was in the academy, he used to come and visit him all the time, and he would never refer to him as anything other than Jiji. He had looked at Naruto as if he was another grandchild, since he acted as if he was. After Naruto had become a genin, he seemed to have changed and withdrawn from the Sandaime. He would not admit it out loud, but he missed having Naruto around. He used to actually look forward to Naruto's visits. Naruto did not say anything, only slightly cocked his head to the side. The Sandaime understood the silent communication and, with a signal from his hand, the two Anbu hiding in the office left. Once they had left, Naruto looked up at him. "How did you know they were there?" the Sandaime asked. Naruto never seemed to know that they were there before, but now, he seemed to know when they were there and when they left. "I believe I owe you an apology and an explanation," was all Naruto said. The Sandaime blinked in surprise. "Please, go on," the Sandaime said, gesturing with his hand to the chair next to Naruto. Naruto nodded and got up, taking the offered seat. "First, I would like to apologize for deceiving you," Naruto started, frowning. The Sandaime's eyes widened and he opened his mouth to say something, but was cut off by Naruto raising a hand. "Please, let me just say everything I need to first, because there is a lot to say and not all of it is good. But I feel if you hear the entire story, you will understand." The Sandaime frowned, but nodded his head, gesturing for Naruto to continue. A very serious look came over his face, a look that he reserved for when he was discussing sensitive and very important matters. "For a long time, I have been avoiding the villagers. I'm sure you can understand why," Naruto said, crossing his arms, getting comfortable. The Sandaime narrowed his eyes, but nodded. "I know you have done everything in your power to help me, and you will never know how much that means to me. I owe a great deal to you, and I have done nothing but squander the generosity you have shown me and abuse it. I only recently truly understood what you have done for me, which is why I am here, telling all this to you now." Naruto was slightly stalling, but he was nervous. He was about to tell the Hokage almost everything, and he could very well be thrown in jail for the rest of his life for it, but the Hokage deserved to know the truth. He was the only one that had cared for him since his birth and been nothing but kind to him. The talk with Haku had really stuck with Naruto. So Naruto started from the beginning and told him everything he had done. He made sure to leave off some of the techniques he had learned, not feeling it necessary to disclose everything. By the time Naruto had finished his story, there were only a few hours left until dawn. The Sandaime had been silent the entire time, completely focused on what Naruto was saying, resting his chin on his hands, elbows on his desk. He sat there for a few minutes longer, and Naruto determined he must be deciding what exactly he was going to do. He could understand the Hokage's dilemma. Naruto had just essentially told him that he was a danger to the entire village. His seal was weak, even though he had it under control. He had been spying on and stealing from Konoha shinobi, and he had been able to deceive the entire village, including the Hokage himself, for years. "I understand if you wish to arrest me. I will not put up a fight," Naruto finally said, cutting into the silence. He could hear the Kyuubi yelling at him angrily, as he had been since the moment Naruto stepped into the office ready to spill everything. "That will not be necessary," the Hokage finally said. The serious look on his face had turned into one of calm decisiveness. "If what you are saying is true, then you are a valuable asset to Konohagure. It would be a waste to throw you into a cell. You would make an excellent Anbu. But before you could, you must first become a Chunin, which means I will have to enter your team into the upcoming exam." Naruto was doing his best to conceal his surprise, but he was sure his eyes had widened just a fraction. He thought he was going to get punished, but it looked like the Hokage was going to ignore everything and actually try to promote him. "Hokage-sama, you're not angry?" Naruto asked in confusion. "No. You were correct. Hearing the entire story made me understand. I'm not angry, I am actually ashamed of myself," the Hokage answered honestly, rubbing his temples. It seemed like the energy just drained from him. "I don't understand," Naruto said, frowning. Why would the Hokage be ashamed of himself? He didn't do anything wrong. "I am old Naruto and not what I once was. I have grown ignorant and perhaps I still cannot look beyond what I wish to see to how things really are. I have always been told that I was a dreamer," the Hokage sighed. "I thought I was protecting you by not allowing anyone to speak about the events of your birth and by not giving you special attention, but I have just made things worse. You are the way you are because of this foolish old man's actions. I cannot blame you for anything you have done. You have become an exceptional young man, Naruto, and I am actually very proud of you." This time Naruto's eyes did widen. "I know you will do great things, Naruto. Whether you see it yet or not, the will of fire is strong in you, and I genuinely believe you will one day surpass me," the Hokage said with a sincere and warm smile. Naruto quickly got out of the chair and resumed his kneeling position in front of the Sandaime with his head down. "I will not let you down, Hokage-sama," Naruto said, more serious than he had ever been. No one had ever believed in him before. "I know you won't, Naruto," the Sandaime replied, ending their conversation. Naruto lowered his head slightly before standing up and leaving the tower. He finally understood what Haku had been trying to tell him. Naruto knew that he would, without a thought, give up his life for the Sandaime because he owed it to him. Chapter 7. There were only a few days left until the Chunin exams when Naruto felt Haku's chakra calling him through his corresponding seal. It was mid-morning and he had been training in the forest with his clones since the sun had come up. It was the first time that Haku had called him, so Naruto was glad that the seals worked. He had tested them out himself, but he was starting to worry that perhaps they didn't work so well over long distances. He made sure that his clones were all working on something before he used a Hiraishin to where Haku and Zabuza were waiting. "Good morning, Naruto-kun," Haku said when Naruto appeared before them. "Yo," Zabuza said, sitting on a couch next to Haku. "Good morning Zabuza-san, Haku-chan. I hope things have been going well for both of you," Naruto replied. He was nauseous from the Hiraishin, but he hid it. He knew it would be much worse when he got back. "Very well, thank you. We really appreciate the information you gave us regarding the safe houses." Haku bowed to Naruto. Yeah, enough with the bullshit. "Do you have our payment?" Zabuza asked. Naruto cocked his eyebrow at Zabuza but threw a pouch full of money at him. "What have you got for me?" Naruto asked. If Zabuza wanted to get to the point, then he would too. "We have heard quite a bit regarding a new village called Atogakure. It seems to be growing and expanding bases into other countries fairly quickly. From what we heard, a man named Orochimaru is the leader of this group," Haku explained. Naruto narrowed his eyes. He knew of this Orochimaru. He was the one that had created the curse seal that was on Anko, and he was also one of the legendary Sannin of Konoha. And apparently an evil genius, if what he had read in some books was true. So that is what he has been up to these past years, Naruto thought. "We have also heard that he plans to use Sunagakure in an invasion of Konohagure. I am not sure how he plans to do that, but from what we hear, it has something to do with the upcoming Chunin exams taking place there. I'm sure you know of that," Haku continued. Naruto nodded his head. This was bad. So Orochimaru was going to use Sunagakure to attack Konoha in his place. Or did Suna ally with Odo? But why? Odo was even smaller than Suna, which was the smallest of the 5 great shinobi nations. Even with Odo allied with Suna, they would not be able to take on Konohagure. Sure, it would damage the village, but Konoha would still be able to win. Why was he even wanting to attack Konoha? It seemed as though he wanted to start a war, but was it just because he wanted to get back at Konoha? That didn't seem right. If he wanted Konoha weakened enough to take over, then he should use Kumagakure, which was the closest to Konoha in power. Besides, Orochimaru had left the village himself, although his was getting heat from the village due to his experiments, and he had started up his own village, so he shouldn't even care about Konoha anymore. There had to be some other reason. "Is that all?" Naruto asked. "Actually, we have heard of another group that has been getting some attention, which Orochimaru was once a part of. They are calling themselves the Akatsuki. They first appeared in Omegakure around the Third Shinobi War, but there isn't much we know, besides they overthrew the leader of the village and took it over. Apparently now it is just a small group of mercenaries, as far as Zabuza and I can gather, who are incredibly powerful, probably all S-rank shinobi. We haven't been able to collect much intel on them since they keep to themselves, so we're not sure of their motive. It seems they only have a handful of members who move in teams of 2. They all wear black cloaks with red clouds on them," Haku supplied with a frown. Zabuza had an annoyed look on his face. "Did they approach you and ask you to join?" Naruto asked, getting an odd feeling from the two. They looked at him in surprise before nodding. "What did you tell them?" "I'm sure they could offer more than I could. We told them no. Zabuza-san and I have our own plans and we don't want to be deterred from them. Your assistance is all we need," Haku responded. "You have been most helpful. Is there anything you need while I'm here?" Naruto asked. "Actually, I have a question," Zabuza said. Naruto's eyebrow lifted, silently telling him to continue. "You used those dual blades when we fought before. You any good with them?" Naruto was surprised by the question, but didn't let it show. "I'd say I'm proficient with them," Naruto responded before Zabuza threw something covered in cloth at him. Naruto caught it, feeling an odd energy coming from whatever was wrapped within it. After looking inside, he found 2 slim double-edged blades that were pulsing a strange energy. They both had small upward-pointing blades near the top and bottom of the main blade. "They are called Kiba," Zabuza told him. Naruto frowned. He knew he had heard that name before. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. "These are," Naruto began in awe. "One of the swords of the 7 swordsmen of the mist." Zabuza finished for him. Naruto just looked up at him in confusion. A look of embarrassment came over Zabuza's face. We retrieved them from the previous owner. We thought you would make better use of them. And we wanted to thank you for everything you have done for us. Haku added with a smile. Zabuza was still looking away from Naruto in obvious discomfort. Thank you. Naruto said with genuine appreciation, giving them a deep bow. This was the first gift anyone had ever given him, and for it to be such an inexplicable one, Naruto was truly honored that they would give such a gift to him. Yeah, just don't cut yourself. These are known to be the sharpest swords in existence, you know. They utilize lightning chakra, but if you can't use that, it's fine. They'll still be deadly. Zabuza said, feeling awkward about the whole situation. Not to worry. I will figure out how to use them properly. Naruto said with a small smile. Zabuza looked away again in embarrassment, scratching his head. Haku just looked between the two with a smile of his own. That was all. You can go now. Zabuza said quickly. Naruto just bowed to them and disappeared. Naruto-kun is going to be a great shinobi one day. And we can say we were right there, next to him, helping him along the way. Haku said softly to Zabuza, who nodded. When Naruto arrived back in the forest, he immediately fell to his knees retched. The clones stopped what they were doing and ran over to him in worry. I'm fine. Just give me a sec. Naruto told them, sitting back and breathing deeply. They looked at him with doubt but went back to training, keeping their eye on him. He wrote a letter while sitting to send to the Hokage. He didn't know if the Sandaime knew of the Suna threat or not, but he wanted to warn him, just in case. He left out the part about the Akatsuki because they didn't seem to be interested in Konoha. He then had a clone deliver the letter. Ugh, not now. Naruto huffed in annoyance. The barrier seal on his apartment just went off, letting him know that Sakura was there, about to knock on his door. He was getting awfully popular lately. I can go. One of his clones offered. It'll just get worse if you use it again. It's fine. I'll go. You guys continue training. I need to get used to it anyway. Naruto said with a sigh, getting up slowly. He used the Hiraishin to get into his apartment. Once there, he fell to his knees again but held back the retch. He could hear Sakura still knocking at the door. He took a deep breath, stood up, and composed himself while he slowly made his way to the door. Hello, Sakura-san. Naruto said after opening the door. It looked like she had just turned and was starting to leave. Oh. I thought you weren't home. Sakura said with a blush. Can I help you with something? Naruto asked her. Well actually, can I come inside? Sakura asked awkwardly. Naruto didn't respond, just opened the door wider and moved out of the way, inviting her in. Would you like some tea? He asked her, having read that when guests come over it was polite to offer tea, as she closed the door behind her. She was looking around his apartment curiously. It was devoid of everything but some old-looking furniture and was impeccably clean. Sakura didn't know why, but she thought it would be messier. Yes, please. She answered with an awkward smile, making her way to the couch and sitting down while still looking around. Naruto moved to the kitchen and put some water in a pot. His stove was old and took almost 10 minutes to boil water, so instead of using it, he concentrated some fire into his hand and heated the water quickly. He poured the water into 2 cups that were chipped and mismatched and added the tea. He set her tea on the coffee table in front of her and took a seat on the opposite end of the couch. That was quick. She said in surprise. Naruto just shrugged in reply, sipping his tea gently, waiting for her to explain why she was here. He was glad for the tea, since it began to alleviate his nausea. Sakura picked up her cup and held it nervously in her hands. I know you've been training with Sasuke. I can tell whenever we get together as a team to train that he has gotten so much stronger lately. I feel like I'm so far behind you too. I don't want to hold you guys back, but I don't know what to do. I'm just so weak. Sakura's eyes started to water as she looked into her teacup, hands tightening around it. Naruto was quiet for a moment, not sure how, or if he even wanted to, console her. He didn't know why she decided to come to him, but just as with Sasuke, Sakura was part of his team and he acknowledged those that realized they were weak but wanted to get stronger. Naruto knew that Kakashi didn't know how to train Sakura, so she was usually left on her own when they all trained together. He did feel bad that Sakura wasn't able to get stronger. She needed someone to teach her, but her parents were civilians and her sensei paid more attention to Naruto and Sasuke than her. I can probably help you out. Naruto said slowly. He was the only one that he knew of that could train her and she desperately needed training. You can? Really? Sakura asked in excitement, looking at him with her eyes still watery. Naruto nodded in reply. Can I train with you and Sasuke? Naruto cocked his head to the side. Our type of training would not work with you. I have to teach you separately. He told her. Her excitement diminished. Why? She asked dejectedly. Sasuke's natural abilities allow for him to excel in ninjutsu and taijutsu. You have excellent chakra control, so I think your focus should be medical ninjutsu and jinjutsu. Naruto told her thoughtfully. Sakura looked at him in surprise. "You really think I could be good at those?" she asked. She had never even thought about doing any other type of jutsu before. She supposed it was because all Team 7 ever worked on was ninjutsu and taijutsu, so she thought that was what she was supposed to be doing. Naruto nodded. "But are they really useful? They seem more defensive. We didn't even learn any of those in the academy, and I don't know anyone that does medical ninjutsu besides the nurses in the hospital, and I only know of Kurenai-sensei as a genjutsu user," she said, unsure. "They are more defensive, but you could use them offensively too. And our team is not very well-rounded the way it is. Think about the other teams compared to ours. They all have strengths and weaknesses, but each of the other teammates pick up where one lacks. Sasuke and I are the powerhouses, and Kakashi was trying to train you to be one too. But there are ways to counteract straight ninjutsu and taijutsu, even if you are masters in them," Naruto explained to her. Sakura was looking into her tea with a frown. "You're right. We don't know anything but ninjutsu and taijutsu. The books that we read in the academy said the same thing, that a team full of just those two jutsus could easily be overtaken," Sakura said thoughtfully. "I will say though, that they seem to do that on purpose, having teams that are trained for specific uses such as the Hikage, Inuzuka, and Abiram team. Their skills allow for them to be a great tracking team. But they still have different abilities themselves that allow for great teamwork. For example, the Abiram is a long-range fighter with his Kikage, the Inuzuka is a mid-range fighter, and the Hikage is a close-range one. The Inoshika CHM team is excellent for reconnaissance. Shikamaru can hold enemies with his shadows, while the Yamanaka enters their mind and gathers information, and the Akamichi covers their back, allowing them time to gather necessary information. Our team is made to be the powerhouse team, the one that is sent out to mess up the enemy, but so far, we use only ninjutsu and taijutsu. That's why, if you were to be a medical ninjutsu and genjutsu user, you would round out the team. Not only that, you would be the most essential part of it, giving Sasuke and I much needed support." Naruto didn't understand why he had to spell it out for her. He thought she would understand how important she would be to the team if she learned the proper jutsu for her specific skill set. But he supposed that she was never told the importance of a well-rounded team. Naruto, himself, was a well-rounded jutsu user, knowing many different types of jutsu, but he wasn't going to do all the work for the team. "We could easily be the strongest team then," Sakura said in awe, eyes wide. Suddenly, all hesitation left her face, and a look of determination took its place. "Please teach me in medical ninjutsu and genjutsu. There are only 3 days left until the Chunin exams. I am going to have to really push you for you to be prepared by that time, you understand?" Naruto asked seriously. Sakura just nodded her head, the same determination in her eyes. "Very well. I want you to gather as many anatomy and medical books as possible and start reading them immediately. I will be quizzing you throughout our training, so be prepared. I can only teach you so much before you understand the physiology of the body. Let us begin." Chapter 8. Naruto woke up the day of the Chunin exams feeling calm and prepared. He and his team were ready for whatever attack Orochimaru had planned. He had clones trained ceaselessly with Sasuke and Sakura, while he had trained in the forest with more of his clones. Kakashi had been put on high alert due to the warning Naruto had given the Hokage and had allowed Naruto to take over training the team in his stead. He would occasionally appear where a clone was training one of his other team members and watch for a bit, sometimes making comments or corrections. His help was appreciated when he was training Sakura in genjutsu because Naruto was still not that great at it, though helping Sakura was helping him with it as well. He got dressed and left his apartment, finding Sasuke and Sakura waiting for him downstairs. At some point, Sasuke, Sakura and even Kakashi had all agreed that Naruto was the unofficial leader of their team without consulting him, but it didn't bother him so much. They began walking towards the building housing the first part of their exams. Naruto had spied on some lower-level Chunin and found out that the exam would be in 3 parts and told his team so that they would be prepared. Halfway to the building, they found Kakashi waiting for them. He gave them a proud smile while accompanying them the rest of the way there and into the building. "All of the Rookie 9 will be partaking in this exam, but don't let that affect your feelings if you have to fight them. Just give it all you've got. Make me proud, kids," Kakashi told them after escorting them as far as he could. Sasuke and Sakura gave him a confident nod, while Naruto shared a look with Kakashi, silently telling him he would keep an eye out on the other contestants, and they walked the rest of the way down the hallway towards the room they were supposed to go to. Once they reached the 2nd floor, they found a crowd of people waiting outside the door to a room. Naruto frowned and moved forward into the crowd to see what was happening, Sasuke and Sakura following behind him. There they found 2 Konoha shinobi blocking the doorway, which had the number 301 on it, knocking back any shinobi that tried to pass. Naruto lifted his eyebrow and gave a look to Sasuke and Sakura, who both noticed the genjutsu around the number. They looked back at him, silently letting him take the lead. Naruto just shrugged and led his team past the crowd towards the stairs to get to the third floor where the real room 301 was. He didn't see any real threat there. And he figured that the two Chunin that were disguising themselves as genin and messing with the others were just there to look out for potential threats. Hey. You're one of the rookie teams. Where do you think you're going? A girl with dark brown hair pulled into two buns and a Konoha hit I-8 yelled at them. Team 7 turned around to look at her and saw that everyone there was now looking at them. To the third floor where we're supposed to go. Sakura answered for them. They turned back around and continued walking. As the crowd left to follow Team 7, the Konoha guards at the door looked at each other. So that was Kakashi's rookie team. He seems to have done well for his first team. One said to the other. This should be interesting. The other agreed. As Naruto led his team to the stairs, he felt eyes on his back. He turned around to look at the balcony that was above him and his team. There, he saw a male with black hair cut into a bowl shape with large eyebrows, wearing a green spandex bodysuit. Naruto quickly turned away from what he saw. That guy cannot be serious. He looks completely out of his mind and I don't feel any chakra coming from him. He heard the green glad man jump down from the balcony. Hey. Don't ignore me. Fight me. The male yelled while pointing at them. Naruto got an overwhelming sense of deja vu, as if it was his clone from the academy behind him. Naruto gave Sakura a look. They had agreed that Sakura do the talking for them, since Naruto and Sasuke didn't want to talk to anyone. Fighting outside of the exams is not allowed. It would disqualify both our teams. Sakura told the strange male. The same girl with the buns came up next to him and punched him in the head. Don't go off on your own, Lee. And stop trying to fight everyone before the exams even start. She yelled at him. The other male next to her scoffed haughtily at them. Naruto recognized the second male as a member of the Hyuga clan from his eyes. Naruto turned around again and started leading his team once again towards the stairs. Stop ignoring us. Lee and the bun-haired girl yelled at them. Team 7 continued walking without looking back. Hey, what are your names? The Hyuga male asked them. Naruto glanced at Sakura. It's impolite to ask others their name before giving their own. Sakura replied, facing the other team while Naruto and Sasuke stopped to wait for her, but kept their back to them. Hyuga Niji. The Hyuga replied. Naruto frowned. He had heard about that one. Rock Lee. The green-clad one said excitedly. Tenten. The bun-haired girl said. I'm Haruno Sakura, that's Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke. Sakura said, pointing to each while naming them. Naruto and Sasuke started walking again after the introductions, Sakura turning around and following. What is up with them? They're just baby genin and they act like that. It pisses me off. Tenten yelled angrily. Haruno Sakura Lee said, watching her walk away in infatuation. Niji looked at his team in annoyance, then back at the retreating backs of Team 7. They are an interesting team. I look forward to seeing what they can do. Niji thought to himself. Once Naruto and his team reached the real doors to room 301, he could feel the chakra signatures of dozens of shinobi inside. A shiver of excitement ran down his spine and he smirked almost evilly at his team, with Sasuke responding with his own excited smirk and Sakura just smiling confidently. They opened the door to find all eyes in the room on them. Naruto ignored everyone, keeping the bored look on his face that he had reverted to once the doors started opening, and led his team towards where Shikamaru and his team were waiting. Keeping his eyes open for potential threats. Yo. Shikamaru said with a smile, raising a hand in greeting. Naruto nodded back his own greeting. He and Shikamaru had been spending many evenings in each other's company, either playing Shingai or watching the clouds, and on rare occasions going out to dinner with Shikamaru's team. Naruto was surprised at how well the two of them got along. Shikamaru also wasn't angry when Naruto told him about modifying the Nara clan signature jutsu. He was more intrigued and asked him many questions about it. Sakura moved to stand near Ino and they began arguing, with Ino sending glances and flipping her hair at Sasuke, who stood quietly next to Naruto, waiting for the exam to begin. Naruto gave a nod of greeting to Chimjai as well. All of a sudden, Naruto picked up on a chakra signature that was very similar to his own. He also felt the Kikbi perk up in interest. He looked over to the chakra source and saw a pale male with reddish-brown hair, dark shadows around his turquoise eyes, and the kanji for love on his forehead above his left eye. Naruto noted that he was wearing a Sunagakur hit I-8. He seemed to sense Naruto looking at him because he looked towards him. Naruto narrowed his eyes while the other gave him a look full of hate, also narrowing his eyes. So that was what Orochimaru had in mind. Sending the Jinchuriki from Suna. Naruto saw the other's teammates look at him in confusion before he heard someone calling to him. So we're all here then. It's been a while since we've been together like this. I see you even changed your outfit for the occasion too, Naruto. Naruto shifted his eyes to see three other Konoha shinobi walking towards them. Naruto could tell right away that they were the last members of the Rookie Nine, from the blushing Hyuga girl's eyes, the dog next to the smirking male that spoke, and the muted humming of Kakashi coming from within the last male. Naruto just shrugged in response, earning a confused look from the Hyuga girl and the Inuzuka's mouth to drop in surprise. He couldn't see the Aburam's reaction due to his sunglasses and collar, but he was probably surprised as well. "What happened to you?" Kiba, Naruto remembered his name being, asked loudly. Naruto just shrugged his shoulders again. You guys are attracting a lot of attention," a male voice warned. The group turned to see a male with light gray hair pulled back into a low ponytail wearing glasses and a Konoha Hittite walking towards them. Naruto kept his face blank, though he wanted to narrow his eyes. This new male had a scent of snakes around him and something about him was off, causing Naruto to feel cautious. From one of his few talks with Anko, whom would sometimes come and visit or spar with him when he was training in the forest, she had told him that Orochimaru had an obsession with snakes. "You guys are awfully noisy for rookies." Naruto tuned out the conversation with the white-haired man, who introduced himself as Kabuto, and continued scanning the room until he heard Kabuto say that this was not the first time he had taken the test. Naruto noted that this Kabuto didn't seem bothered by having to retake it. "So you must know all about these exams then?" Sakura commented. "Yes, especially with these." Kabuto replied, taking out some cards from the pouch on his hip. "These are Nin info cards," he told them, in response to the questioning look some of the Rookie Nine gave him. He placed the cards on the ground and took one out of the pile to show them what was on them. While he was distracted, Naruto quickly grabbed a few of the cards without anyone noticing and putting them in his pocket to look over later and perhaps give to Kakashi to take to the Hokage. Naruto was told to just keep an eye out, not actually involve himself with the invasion, but he had wanted to do his own internal investigation, which Shikamaru had offered his assistance in when Naruto had told him about it, after grumbling for a while. While Kabuto was showing the rest of the Rookie Nine what was on the cards, Naruto was looking around the room, taking note of all the Odo and Chunin that were there. It looked like there was only one team from Odo, but Suna had 10 teams. The Odo team was probably only there to keep an eye on things. After Kabuto put his cards away, giving them a strange look first, there was a bang, and the examiners appeared in a poof of smoke. The tall and muscular male in front of the group wearing a black trench coat with scars on his face and a bandana Hittite that covered his head introduced himself as Marino Ibiki. Naruto's eyes shot to Shikamaru's, noticing the surprise in his. They were apparently taking this invasion very seriously for the head of Konoha's torture and interrogation unit to be an examiner. "Everybody come up and take a number. That number will decide where you sit. Once everyone is seated, we will begin the first test," Ibiki said. Naruto noticed that a male Konoha shinobi next to Ibiki had papers in his hand. He had already known that the first test was going to be a written one and had told Sasuke, Sakura and Shikamaru. Once everyone had taken their seats, Naruto noticed he was next to the Hyuga girl. "But good luck, Naruto-kun," Hinata told him timidly, with a blush on her cheeks. Naruto contemplated ignoring her, but she seemed nice enough and she was a Konoha shinobi, albeit a weak-looking one, for the daughter of the head of the Hyuga clan. He figured that being friendly with the head of the clan's daughter couldn't hurt for his political moves in the future. "Thank you, Hinata-chan. Good luck to you too," he told her. She blushed and looked away quickly. Naruto furrowed his brows. What was that about? He thought to himself, looking back to the front of the room where Ibiki was standing, going over the rules while writing them on the board. So the point of this test is to cheat. Are the questions really that hard? They probably added some examiners posing as contestants to copy off of then. Naruto knew that his team would have no problem answering the questions. He also knew that Shikamaru would have gotten off his ass and studied so that he could move on, but he hoped the other two on his team would pass. He figured Shikamaru had told his other teammates about the test and had them study as well. Once Ibiki had told them they had an hour to complete the test, they were told to begin. Naruto flipped over the paper and looked at the test before doing anything. The questions were fairly difficult, but due to his extensive knowledge from reading and training, he knew the answers to all the questions. He wrote his name then, in the top right corner of the page, he created a small skin, which would make any answer he wrote on his test seem as if he was just scribbling on it instead of writing in answers, and proceeded to answer the questions. He could feel Hinata glancing at him curiously from time to time and wondered if she would get caught by the examiners thinking she was copying off him. He completed the test in 5 minutes, turning it over and sitting back. He saw Ibiki looking at him since he was apparently the first to finish the test. Naruto looked him in the eyes and smirked. Ibiki looked blankly back before giving him a smirk of his own. Naruto watched as teams were eliminated the closer the hour came to a close. Once 45 minutes passed, Ibiki told the contestants that it was time for the 10th question. So far, 13 teams had been eliminated for cheating. He explained the rules of the 10th question and told anyone who didn't want to answer the final question to leave. Naruto frowned. He hadn't heard about this specific part of the test. He figured it was probably something Ibiki had made up on the fly, just adding it before the test actually started. He continued sitting back, relaxed, with his hands in his pockets, waiting for the last question. He was actually surprised at how many teams were leaving. With only 5 minutes left in the test, 14 teams remained. Once the time was up, Ibiki gave a sadistic grin. "You all pass," he told them. Naruto raised an eyebrow, while many of the other genin yelled out in confusion and anger. Naruto looked to Shikamaru, who met his eyes. They both smirked at each other, silently saying how like head of T and I, messing with everyone's heads. All of a sudden, Naruto felt a familiar chakra signature coming towards them quickly from the left of the building. Just as he was raising his eyebrow in question, a blur came crashing through the building. Naruto's face went blank as Anko appeared before the genin, with a banner behind her that he assumed said test number 2, led by examiner Mitarashi Anko, but her body was completely blocking the words, so he couldn't make them out for sure, and introducing herself loudly, telling them to follow her. Naruto gave her a deadpan look when she looked at him with a massive grin. "Wow, only 14 of you. That test must have been a good one, Ibiki. But my test will knock them down by at least half," she said, shaking in excitement. While the rest of the genin left with Anko, Ibiki collected the tests. Once he got to Naruto's, he turned it over and looked at it in confusion. Then he looked at the top of the paper and saw the FANFiction. His eyes widened in surprise before he released the seal, and the correct answers to all the questions appeared before him. "That Uzumaki Naruto, he's one to look out for," Ibiki thought with a smile, being one of the only people besides the Hokage and Kakashi to know that Naruto had been the one to supply the intel about the Suna invasion. Chapter 9. As the remaining genin were making their way to where the second test would be taking place, Anko came up to Naruto and threw her arm around him. "Nice to see that you made it, kiddo," she told him, almost whispering in his ear. Her face came so close to his. She was deliberately rubbing her ample chest against him too. He kept his blank face on, arms crossed, even though he wanted to roll his eyes at her behavior. She was bringing attention to him on purpose. She was probably trying to make him everyone's target for the next test, which he knew to be a survival one. Sadistic woman. Naruto thought, ignoring the looks of surprise and confusion all the others of the Rookie 9 were giving him. He realized that she was leading everyone to the forest of death. He looked at her, raising his eyebrow in question, before she winked back and let go of him to stand in front of the group to explain the second test. Once she had let him go, Naruto got a strong scent of snakes and looked at the remaining teams. There was one team that he hadn't noticed before, each with a straw hat and a purple rope tied around them. Naruto's eyes fell on the one that had long hair and blank eyes. The snake smell was the strongest from that one. In fact, that male smelled like a snake, not just having the scent of snakes around him, like the others. Naruto's eyes narrowed and he looked at Shikamaru, catching his attention. He shifted his eyes towards the long-haired male with a dark look. He saw Shikamaru follow his gaze and silently ask him if he was sure. Naruto just barely moved his head in a nod. A serious look came over Shikamaru's face and he sighed. Naruto just had time to shift his head, barely missing the kunai that was aimed at his face. Anko was behind him the next second, and Naruto had to block the kunai she had aimed at his throat with his own. He saw many of the genin jerk in surprise. "Are you ignoring me, Naruto-kun?" Anko asked, saying his name huskily. "Never." He responded calmly, with a grin. Anko quickly shifted her kunai to rest against the tongue that appeared next to her, holding the kunai she had thrown, belonging to the long-haired man that had moved to stand right behind her. The kunai was pointed straight at Anko's face. Naruto tensed, ready to attack if the man tried anything. He saw Shikamaru tense as well, hands in his pockets. Naruto guessed that he was gripping a kunai of his own. "Here's your kunai." The long-haired man slurred around his tongue. Naruto looked back to him and met his eyes. He must have given something away in the look, because a look of surprise, quickly followed by one of intense interest, flashed in the strange man's eyes. Naruto narrowed his eyes in return. "Why, thank you. But I don't suggest you sneak up on me unless you want to die," she said with a smile, taking the offered kunai back as the disguised Orochimaru moved away to rejoin his group. Naruto saw Shikamaru sigh in relief and mumble what Naruto could guess was Mendaki-sai. "Now then, if you could all fill out these waivers while I explain the second test, we can begin. These are just so it won't be my responsibility if you die, which some of you will. Give these to those men over there." Anko pointed to 2 men sitting behind a booth that had an open curtain in front after I have finished going over the details. Anko moved out from behind Naruto and began again explaining the second test. She also told them about the forest, which Naruto tuned out, instead focusing intently on not looking in the direction of Orochimaru, whom he could feel watching him. Once she got into saying what type of survival test it was, he went back to paying attention. 5 days to get a scroll and get to the tower in the middle. That's all she could come up with. So easy. Naruto thought, grinning at her when she looked towards him. Don't die. She told the genin with a grin, having finished her explanation. Naruto made sure that his team was the first to get their scroll from the men behind the booth. While he was behind the curtain he made a clone and hit him in the shadow that came off the curtain, leaving him there after they received their scroll, and walked towards the entrance he would usually use when entering the forest. 5 days. Are we really going to survive? Sakura asked them with fear in her voice. Naruto turned to her, seeing that Sasuke had a worried look on his face too. We'll be fine. I've spent a lot of time in here, so I know a lot about this forest. Naruto told them in an attempt to reassure them. It seemed to work when they gave him small smiles back. Oh yeah? How do you know Anko-san, Naruto? Sakura asked him. I would run into her here in the forest every once in a while. Naruto replied. You guys seem close. Sasuke said blankly. That? She was just doing that to make me a target. She's evil like that. Naruto told them nonchalantly with a shrug. They were going to respond when Naruto's eyes blurred momentarily and then he smirked. Where it go? He said right before the gates in front of them opened. Naruto immediately took off, heading towards the tower at a pace just slow enough for Sakura to keep up. He wanted to get there as soon as possible, hopefully finding Shikamaru on the way and avoiding Orochimaru completely. He didn't like the fact that he seemed interested in him. It didn't look like he had any luck, as 5 minutes later he sensed Orochimaru and his team closing in on them quickly. Shit. Naruto said out loud, causing Sasuke and Sakura to look at him in shock, just as a large gust of wind full of sharp leaves came at them, cutting into them shallowly. Already Sasuke yelled in surprise, before the 3 of them were blown apart. Shit shit shit. Naruto kept saying in his head. He's gunning for us. He immediately took off to where he sensed the rest of his team was blown to, which was where Orochimaru and his teammates were. He let out his killing intent to scare off the snakes that were closing in on him so that he could get to his team without any interruptions. He knew that Orochimaru must be trying to send them his way to distract him because the snakes usually stayed away from him. He got back to his team just in time to see Sakura and Sasuke fight off a genjutsu Orochimaru had placed on them. Naruto leaped in front of his teammates, growling angrily at Orochimaru, focusing all of his killing intent on him. He could tell that it was affecting Sasuke and Sakura, but at the moment he didn't care. This was a Sannin, an S-class missing nin that Naruto could not hold back on whatsoever, or else it could cost him and his team their lives. Ah, Naruto-kun. I thought the snakes would distract you for longer. Orochimaru said calmly, hiding his surprise. They know to stay away from something more dangerous than them. Naruto replied, trying to calm down. If he was too emotional, he could mess this up. He needed a clear head. What he really needed was for Sasuke and Sakura to be somewhere else so that he could go all out on Orochimaru without worrying about their safety, but that wasn't going to happen, so he had to think quickly on his feet. Naruto saw Orochimaru give a signal for his 2 teammates to attack him. He was able to unseal his dual blades in time to block their kunai. He hadn't yet mastered the kiba, so he wasn't going to use them and potentially have them go out of control and blast apart the forest, as he knew they could. He knew that Orochimaru was trying to distract him, which made him realize something. He's trying to get me away from my teammates, but why? There's nothing from Sakura that he would want in Sasuke. Naruto yelled inside his head. Of course. Is it the Sharingan? Naruto ground his teeth together and shoved the 2 Odonin away from him while he released his weight seals, which were on the 2nd level, and threw off his trench coat for optimum mobility and speed. He was regretting not saying anything earlier, but if he had told Anko who Orochimaru was, she would have immediately gone all out on him, and there would definitely be casualties among the genin teams. That would cause a political fallout between the shinobi villages, since Orochimaru was Konoha's responsibility, and it would fall on them if any genin from other villages were killed. Sasuke, Sakura, be careful. He's an S-class missing nin. He yelled to his team, blocking the kicks aimed at his head and hands. He needed to finish with these 2 quickly before Orochimaru could do anything to his teammates, and he could only do that by not holding back. Naruto spun in a circle, blades extended, just barely missing, slashing the 2 shinobi in the chest and forcing them to jump further away from his team into the surrounding forest. He leapt in the trees, following them, and made the bird seal with one hand. Oden. Dirixum. Star, he called, as the ground under and around the 2 shinobi shot up in spikes. One spike was able to impale the arm of one of the nin. The other jumped out of the way, with just a scratch on his leg. Naruto was on the one that was scratched in an instant, slashing with one of his blades. The blade once again just missed, but he had surrounded it with his chakra, which extended the blade's reach, this time cutting shallowly into his chest. He heard the other shinobi and started moving before it was too late. Suiton. Sugaden, the Odonin yelled, as water arched above and then downward, spiraling toward where Naruto had just been standing. The water impaled the ground, causing mud and water to splash the area. Naruto used this to hide his movement as he sped towards the nin, one hand in the boar seal. Rain. Jibashi Dottie said, lightning shooting out of his hands, mixing with the mud and water that was barreling towards the Odo nin and electrocuting him. Naruto heard him scream out and continued going forward, finishing him off by slashing him in half through the stomach with his blades. He then turned on his heel and ran at the remaining Odo nin, who was trying to get up after being pelted by mud and water while holding his chest. Naruto didn't slow down, just lifted his blade, running past him and decapitating him on his way back to where Sasuke and Sakura were facing Orochimaru. But Sasuke and Sakura after Naruto left them. Sasuke didn't waste any time attacking the man who had introduced himself as Orochimaru earlier. He activated his Sharingan, which, thanks to his training with Naruto, was fully developed with all three Tomo. You've already fully developed your Sharingan. Very impressive, Sasuke-kun. Orochimaru said in surprise. Sasuke had gotten stronger than he thought. His tongue slipped out of his mouth from his excitement. Sasuke used his speed to try and get behind Orochimaru in an attempt to kick him, but the Sannin dodged and used his tongue to wrap around Sasuke's leg, throwing him away from himself. Sakura had advanced on Orochimaru right after Sasuke, her hands already glowing green, attempting to hit him in a vital point. Before she could, Orochimaru turned and backhanded her away, making her slam into a surrounding tree. Pain. Nkakik no jutsu, Sasuke yelled, expelling a massive ball of fire at Orochimaru. He dodged, causing the tree he was standing in front of to explode with wood shrapnel flying in all directions and landed on a branch of the tree across from the one Sasuke was on. Sakura had recovered and jumped onto the branch next to Sasuke. Even though the fireball had missed, the heat was enough that Orochimaru's face was melting. He peeled off the face he had used as a disguise and smiled with his tongue once again out. You've gotten strong, Sasuke-kun. Orochimaru said seriously. He didn't know how Sasuke had gotten this strong so quickly. It made him worry about his plan. Sasuke was supposed to come to him for power, but it looked like Sasuke was becoming more powerful already and he was worried that Sasuke wouldn't feel the need to come to him later. Either way, it cut down on the work he had to do before taking over his body. Just wait. That's nothing. Sasuke said angrily before throwing all of his weapons at Orochimaru with precision. Sakura. He yelled. Sakura created a genjutsu which turned the 20 weapons Sasuke threw into 200. While Orochimaru was dispelling the genjutsu and dodging, Sasuke once again came at him quickly going through 7 hand seals. Pain. Msenka no jutsu. He yelled, shooting a volley of blazing fireballs, some of which caught Orochimaru's clothes, singeing them. Once Orochimaru landed on another branch he turned into a massive snake and charged the two. Sasuke and Sakura were caught by surprise and would have been hit if Naruto hadn't come flying out of nowhere, body slamming the snake, making the head explode at the force Naruto used when it hit a tree. You guys okay? Naruto asked, looking them over. They nodded mutely at him, with wide eyes, seeing that Naruto was covered in mud, blood, and water. Good. He said, turning back towards Orochimaru to see his human body coming out of the snakes. He hissed angrily at Naruto. You have also gotten stronger, I see, Naruto-kun. Orochimaru said with narrowed eyes. How could this be? Their team was far stronger than he had been told. If he had known how strong they were, he would have brought some of his experiments instead of useless pawns. Naruto didn't answer, he just charged Orochimaru head-on with his blades. Orochimaru was taken by surprise at Naruto's speed and his arm was slashed while dodging. He used the blood running down his arm to activate his summoning contract. Fuchius no jutsu, he yelled, summoning a massive snake, which immediately came at Naruto. Naruto dodged by jumping in the air and flipped, landing upside down on a tree branch. With a burst of chakra, he pushed off, propelling himself downward while he held his dual blades out in front, leading the way. The blades pierced the head of the snake and with Naruto's momentum, made the snake's head slam into the forest floor, causing Naruto's blades to go in deeper. While Naruto was dislodging his blades from the snake, Orochimaru's neck elongated, making his head shoot off his body like a snake, and he bit Sasuke's neck. Naruto sped forward, attempting to cut off Orochimaru's head by slicing through his elongated neck, but while Orochimaru was retracting his neck, he wrapped it around Naruto, biting him in the shoulder. Naruto held back a scream at the assault of Orochimaru's chakra entering him. He could hear Sasuke screaming near him as his feet gave way after Orochimaru released him. It had been a quick idea on Orochimaru's part to put the curse seal on Naruto and not just Sasuke, but he was impressed by Naruto's skill, which currently surpassed Sasuke's, and felt that Naruto could be a vital addition to his team. Not only that but Naruto was in Uzumaki, and Orochimaru had a particular fondness for that clan and their incredible abilities. See you very soon, Sasuke-kun, Naruto-kun. Orochimaru said as he dispelled the fatally injured snake and sped away from Team 7. Sakura was left in shock, holding the still screaming Sasuke, looking between him and Naruto, who was doing his best to hold onto the thin branch he had been dropped onto with his weakening strength. Naruto. Sakura yelled, watching him lose his grip and fall from the branch he was on towards the ground. Before Naruto had hit the ground, he felt arms grab him. Oof. He heard from beneath him as he landed on whoever had grabbed him. Damn, you're heavy, Naruto. It's all muscle. He retorted automatically before realizing who had caught him. Nice timing, Shikamaru. He tried smirking at his friend, but it came out as more of a grimace. The pain he was in was on level with the pain he felt after releasing the Kikbi seal for the first time. Naruto attempted to stand, but his vision swam and he fell back over, blacking out. Shikamaru and Sakura looked at each other blankly. We should find shelter while we wait for Naruto and Sasuke to wake up. Shikamaru said. I saw a place that would work well not too far from here. Sakura nodded and helped him lift Naruto. While Shikamaru and Sakura carried Naruto between them and Shinji carried Sasuke on his back, Ino was assigned to pick up Naruto and Sasuke's things. What the hell does he have in here? Ino exclaimed after picking up Naruto's coat. It looked like she was struggling with the weight. He's worse than a woman with all the shit he carries on him. It's called being prepared for anything, Ino. Shikamaru replied with a sigh. Something you could learn from. Could you please keep your voice down? We don't know who or what else is out there. We don't want to attract attention, especially now. They were in serious trouble if they had to get into a fight. Their two main heavy hitters were out, which only left Shinji, who didn't have the speed that Sasuke did, nor the chakra or stamina that Naruto had. Ino wasn't much for fighting, and Shikamaru would be the first to admit that he was more a tactician than a fighter. Sakura had gotten strong enough to be great backup, but that would leave just her and Shinji defending their group. They found shelter under a tree with roots that created a caver under them. While they were moving Naruto and Sasuke into the cave, they noticed signs that the cave had been previously used. Do you think another team was here? Will they be back? Shinji asked nervously, placing Sasuke on the ground just a bit more roughly than necessary. He still hadn't gotten over the comment about fat people not making good shinobi that Sasuke had made back when they were all at the academy. I think we'll be fine. Shikamaru responded calmly. He watched Sakura and Ino fussing over the Uchiha while he laid Naruto down. We need to make watch teams. Shinji and I will be first watch. We'll also set up some traps. We'll come and get you to take over after midnight. He told the girls. You should get some sleep. Come on, Shinji. The sun was just starting to go down when they exited the cave and quickly made some traps around their area. What's going on? Shikamaru heard Shinji ask, either to himself or nobody in particular. Wish I knew. He answered him, sounding annoyed. What if Naruto can sense chakra Chunin exams? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.